Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Performance and Finance for the 9th of July. Mr. Scott, have we got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors David Whitcroft, Councillor Liz Noble and Councillor Sashi Malvaganam. Councillor Lee is subbing for Councillor David Whitcroft, Councillor Glowers is subbing for Councillor Noble, and Councillor Cope is subbing for Councillor Malvaganam. And Councillor Leanne McIntyre has also given her apologies. Councillor Leanne McIntyre has also given her apologies.
Thank you. Minutes from the previous meeting. I've got minutes for the 13th of May and the 12th of June. Are you happy for me to sign those? Marvellous, thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 3, which is any declarations of interest. Marvellous. That takes us to item 4, which is public questions. I believe Mr. Bain is here. Good evening to you, sir. You know the rules. You can ask your question, we've got an answer, and then you can ask a supplementary. Over to you.
Good evening. Question 1. Can it be right that £40,000 is being released from the reserves on the basis that it is no longer required? This is incorrect, and I have raised the issue repeatedly at meetings in the Chamber when the leader assured me in January 2024 that it remained a live issue. This is an additional contribution to the £20,000 that I secured from Taylor Wimpey, which unfortunately was squandered by the Council with no recognised benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. In the absence of the portfolio holder, I'm happy to read the answer on behalf of the committee. This scheme will now forward via the Environment Agency and not from Surrey Heath Borough Council, and thereby it is being removed from the programme. Did you want to ask a supplementary on that, sir?
I'm concerned by the answer because I assume that the district is still the local drainage authority, and as I have been heavily involved in this, having met the director of Taylor Wimpey, and as I say, getting the £20,000 at the outset and working with Wayne Purden, no one has mentioned this to me. The £20,000 didn't make any difference at all to the issue at hand, which is recognised by Wayne Purden. There are 3 ward councillors from West End in the room. There's one from Chobham in the room, and I would like them to support me in asking the council to provide me with correspondence from the Environment Agency, recognising that they accept complete responsibility for addressing this issue, and providing me with the name of an individual who I can contact to make sure that this issue, which has now been live for probably 8 or 9 years and results from the building of 300 houses in West End, and I suspect the council got a significant new homes bonus and therefore felt the degree of responsibility, and the £40,000 was to follow, but absolutely nothing has happened. But what I can show the council is if someone who put this on a post outside my house the other day believes that this is a sufficient preventative measure to stop people going through floodwater and endangering themselves, it was pinned to a post on my land without my permission, but now it's ended up on the road and I collected it today. So all in all, I think this is a shoddy performance, and I do question whether in fact the council is still the local drainage authority. And as I say, I would like to understand the commitment given by the Environment Agency, because the Environment Agency have very badly let this council down in the past. Field 81, which was covered, 9 acres, was covered in hardcore. The Environment Agency gave an undertaking that they would pay for half of the remedial work cost, and they welched on that, and it left the council in a very difficult position as regards that field.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Bear with me just 1 second. Sorry about that, we're just debating on that. Mr Chinay, are you happy to at least come with some information?
Yeah, Chair, I'm fine to come in here. I appreciate the comments raised, Mr Bain, about your supplementary question. I know this project's been in the making for quite some time. I've been in correspondence with Wayne Purdon for many, many months on this project. Unfortunately, the majority of the funding is going to be provided by EA, and they're in a cycle of projects they implement over time. I know it doesn't answer your question. I know you want something to happen in terms of the project to come forward accordingly. I think what I can do is I'll take it away. I'll speak to Wayne Purdon, and also I'll speak to the EA and provide a more robust response to yourself in terms of the timings and when that project will come forward, and to hopefully appease some of your concerns that you're raising tonight.
Thank you. Mr Chinay. Sorry. We're still in public questions, so I'm going to go on to the next question. Mr Bain, you've got question number 2.
I don't know the rules, do I? Why is the council releasing funds to the tune of £91,000 earmarked for traveller site contribution when the issue is one that affects many residents in the borough on almost a daily basis? The council has a statutory duty which it has avoided for over 30 years.
Thank you. Oh, how many buttons have I got? Hang on. Thank you for the question, Mr Bain. So the answer on behalf of the committee, both these questions and answers are in the public domain on the website. The work of the Gypsy and Traveller site assessments for the local plan have now been completed, and therefore this budget is no longer required. I assume you can have a supplementary.
I stressed the word contribution. I did not expect the council to reply that the assessment had been completed. The 76-page document produced by this council has identified an additional need for 32 gypsy sites and 14 travelling showman sites. Clearly £91,000 is irrelevant on the basis that if the council is to fulfil its obligation, it's going to cost somewhere between £10,000 and £15,000 to make proper provision. So I think taking £91,000 back is obviously a disappointment, but actually in the scheme of things is not that relevant. But the point I'm trying to make is that that £91,000 should actually be utilised in trying to resolve this problem, getting someone on their bike and going and finding sites, because until that happens, nothing is going to happen in terms of addressing a problem which blights us all.
Thank you, Mr Bain, and I understand Mr Chinay is going to answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll take that one. So in terms of the local plan, as you know, we've obviously submitted our plan for local examination, which will happen in due course. But in terms of the process for finding traveller sites and travelling showman sites in the borough, we've done quite an extensive piece of work through Regulations 18 consultation, which yourself were party to in terms of coming to those meetings with officers. We've basically site searched the whole borough. We've liaised with councillors. We've liaised with different sort of site owners. We've looked at basically acquiring sites ourselves, but it hasn't come to any fruition in terms of those sites coming forward. So, as you can say, no stone has been unturned in the borough, really. And we've tried our best to find suitable sites. The only site that we're going to come forward with is the site at Swift Lane, which has been provided in the local plan and will be part of the examination process. We've obviously presented various sites to councillors through local plan working group, and so we've tried our hardest to find that. So as part of this particular assessment, we actually used this money to do some transport studies on a site, but it couldn't come forward because of relevant constraints, really. So we have tried our best, but that's the best we could do, really, and that's where we are in terms of our current provision in the local plan, and that will go through the examination. And also, as part of the local plan, we've got a provision where you've got a certain amount of units which are coming forward, and as residential units into the C3 use, they need to provide a provision of gypsum traveller pitches as part of those sites as well. So that's quite a common policy which most local authorities do try to adopt, and that's what will be implemented as part of our emerging local plan.
Can I just say the reason I asked both these questions is I want to put something on the record.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Bain, and as always, it's lovely to see you. You can stay for the rest of the meeting, or you can go. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Okay, see you then. Don't forget your sign. Mr. Bain, your sign.
Mr. Bain.
Okay. Back to the agenda. Transformation programme update is the next item, and which one of you is doing? Oh, it's you. I was looking over there. Okay, Mr. Steve. Oh, sorry. Go on. I'm going to let you, as long as it's a really quick one.
It is very, very quick. Mr. Chinney was kind enough to say that in relation to the scheme, in quotes, the majority of the funding would come from EA. Could I just ask on behalf of Mr. Bain for assurance that that scheme will not go ahead due to a lack of funding?
Okay.
I'm just very cognitive of the fact that we've been waiting since I was a councillor for a scheme to go ahead in Chobham, which has been incredibly downgraded in terms of its aspiration due to a lack of funding, and that again required EA, Surrey County Council and Surrey Heath Borough Council money. So it would be nice to have that assurance given that we're removing it from the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank Councillor Wheeler for your question. I mean, to date, Councillor Wheeler, I haven't been told to the contrary that it won't happen, it's just going through the rounds in terms of the funding required for that project. So until I've been told anything different, I will advise the Chamber accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Chenier. Okay, so, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give a brief introduction to the Transformation Programme report that's in front of you. You'll recall that March this year we brought a Transformation Programme report. That was the first time that had been brought to the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. And we committed to coming back with a little bit more detail and a progress update to enlighten you as to where we were. A few historics if I can. The Transformation Programme started actually in March 2024 with a lesser target and with longer lead-in times for some of the financial objectives to be met. You'll appreciate the shift in our finances late last year required a greater urgency and also an increased financial target. So we found ourselves with an increased target of £3.14 million to try and resolve some of our reliance on our reserves. I'm grateful to everyone here at Surrey Heath Borough Council, particularly the officers in the room and those that are dialed in. It's important to note that we've implemented this transformation programme with only a single seconded post. Everything else has been delivered from the resources within the council, and that's not an insignificant feat. So I'm grateful to the project team, I'm grateful to all the officers that are involved, I'm grateful to the staff that have come forward with ideas and supported the transformation programme throughout the last year, because it has been a monumental effort. I'm also grateful to the councillors that have supported and participated in this programme as well, including executive, who have been very useful in supporting us and giving us their insight. Reassuringly, despite the amount of effort that's been taken and the reliance on existing staffing resource, you'll see from the next paper that comes forward, our performance last year wasn't detrimented as a consequence of this, and that again is a resounding success as far as we are concerned. The report breaks down the programme into the three key areas of activity, so that's discretionary services, organisational design and property. And those are the three areas of focus that we ultimately landed upon, because those are the ones that we felt would find us the greatest efficiencies within the council. For ease of reference, if you look at page 16 of the pack, there's a visual representation of where the savings have originated from. And it's quite impressive that of that £3.14 million target, and it was only 12 months ago where we felt that was quite insurmountable, you will see that we've already identified 2.92 million in efficiencies, with other work streams currently being costed, and 2.5 million of that is either already achieved or accounted for within our financial modelling. I will leave it there. We are happy to take questions. The recommendation is as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens. Okay, so we've all read the paper. Any questions? Wow. Okay. I was very surprised there wouldn't be any questions. Right, so I think it was Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. And I just wanted to clarify one point, which I think is clear in the report. It's paragraph 1.4 on page 14, that the initial idea behind the transformation plan was to try and get to a sort of steady state balanced budget that could be sustainable over the long term. But now that we found out the state of the council's finances last year, and now that local government reorganisation seems to have a definite timetable, the objective is not that at all. The objective is just to reach the end of this council's life without going bust, basically, to put it in normal terms. Is that a correct understanding? And there's a huge list of changes here. And you mentioned staff morale. Can you talk about how staff morale is affected by this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So I'll answer the first element of that, and I know that will give our Section 151 officer palpitations, and then I'll probably pass to either Sarah Bainbridge or Sally Kipping to answer the question in relation to staff morale. We anticipated in March last year that we had a £2.6 million gap to bridge. In September, it transpired it was in excess of £8 million that we had to bridge in terms of our revenue expenditure per year, and that's a significant drain on resources. For a small borough like this to find £8 million in efficiencies is unachievable without catastrophic loss of service. So we had to acknowledge that that was not going to happen. What we did is we focused on the 3.14 million, which essentially is us trying to balance the cost of service against the income to the council. You are right. The focus is to see us towards local government reorganisation or through this medium-term financial strategy. But in truth, we're doing very well. I think that this is an absolute success, and I know that Vicky Radford will come in later on some of the financial outturns for last year. We're in a very strong position, which is really reassuring. I'll hand over.
I'm very happy to answer the question on staff morale. So we have very recently had a staff survey, and the results of that came back. We've literally just published them to staff at an all-staff briefing last week. We were very surprised by the positive results within the staff survey. We had a response rate of over 70%. And what we found was that our results held up very well against the last staff survey that was run in 2023, 2 years ago. Now, the context of that previous survey was that it was on the back of a large pay award, and we'd worked very, very hard at that time to make Surrey Heath a really good place to work. And so we were pleased and encouraged that the staff survey results this year held up well. There were challenges, that we did see challenges within the survey. So, for example, the Surrey Heath is a good place to work had dipped a bit. And we know that as the impact of some of the projects we're delivering as a result of the transformation begin to bite, then staff morale is something we really, really need to focus on. We're very aware of that. So one of the things that myself Miss Bainbridge and Miss Hurst, the HR manager, are doing is looking at well-being particularly, but also staff retention, and really focusing on that over the next 6 months. We want to foster good connections with the council, and we're looking at a number of ways to do that with the hope of continuing the good results we've seen in the recent survey.
Thank you. Can I ask a supplementary to the initial bit,
Yep.
if that's all right? Just looking back at the time scale, so the initial budget for the last financial year thought the gap was going to be about 2.6 million, I think you said, and then we found out in September 2024 that it was 8 million, and then local government reorganisation was announced like Christmas Day or something like that. So the gap between September and December, the transformation programme must have looked impossible. Is that right?
I think it's fair to say we all had concerns about whether or not it would be achievable. That's absolutely true. Impossible, I would say probably not, but possible, but with significant ramifications would be my perspective on it. As I say, to find that level of savings, and we've looked at percentages of controllable revenue expenditure, and it's around about 12% that we found by way of efficiencies, which is notable. It really is. And we were very concerned as a management team, and clearly that concern extended throughout the council about the harm that could do in terms of Surrey Heath as an employer, Surrey Heath as effectively a community of officers, because we're all committed to delivering services on behalf of residents, and to upset that ethos can be quite damaging, because like most local authorities and most organisations, we run very much on goodwill and the enthusiasm of staff. We did not want to detriment that culture. That was our fundamental concern. And clearly what we also didn't want to do was to impact on frontline delivery. And you'll see that whilst there are changes, we have tried to minimise any harm to how we deliver services to our residents.
I know Councillor Leeds was next. I just want to ask a question of Ms Kipping. We discussed it during the Chair's briefing. Can you possibly just clarify the term choose to leave? Because it's mentioned a number of times in the report, and it's obviously we're talking about staff, and the way I read it originally was maybe the different understanding to what it actually is. So if you can just clarify, that would be grateful.
Yes, of course. The Choose to Leave project is all about when a member of staff decides to retire or resign. Prior to the project, what we would generally do is we would just go out to recruit like for like, so the post would just be replaced. The Choose to Leave project has initiated a process where each post where someone chooses to leave, retires or resigns, we look at the way they do their work and whether we can design it so that the job either isn't needed at all or is dealt with in a different way, or can be done at a lower grade for a lower cost. So what we do now is we look at everyone who resigns and do a bit of organisational design effectively behind them. It's been extremely effective. We've managed to make some substantial savings without impacting on service delivery by doing some organisational design behind, as I say, behind a resignation. So that is what we mean when we say the Choose to Leave project.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing is to welcome the amazing work of officers. I mean, what an incredible statement to hear from the Chief Exec that the majority of this is done within existing time and efforts. Thank you, absolutely thank you very much. I think it's incredible to hear that statement committed to delivery of services for residents, which is so important, and very much welcome the outcome of the staff survey. I've certainly seen from my interactions with officers, whilst there are challenges, they're positive and up for the challenge, and I'm really, as a council in this authority, really proud of the hard work that all officers are putting in to try and move heaven and earth on this. A couple of observations. I think in the report, I think it's great to see that whilst we as politicians know there's huge uncertainty on whether that shadow authority will A, be elected in 2026, and B, whether it will actually take place in 2027. Officers have got an eye on the future, talking about 27, 28, 28, 29 and 29, 30. It's that forward strategic planning which I think makes me so proud of our officers here delivering and having an eye on the future. Because, of course, we've seen the various online speculation from people who should probably know better, referencing that apparently we'll be in control of a new unitary authority in 2026, which we know is frankly impossible. And then we see various barking mad ideas calling for us to not sell anything over £25,000 as an asset, which leads me on to the unitary savings. Obviously, we're delivering some pretty awesome savings through our transformation. What impact does that have on Surrey County Council's model? Because we've heard that they might be able to save £1 million by this work across Surrey. This transformation project would eat into Surrey County Council's alleged £1 million worth of savings. I've seen others at £46 million. What the great work officers are doing here delivers quite a lot. What's the impact potentially on Surrey County Council's harebrained scheme of unitarisation?
Sorry, Councillor Lee. Could you ask the question again? I'm not sure I quite got what was being asked. Apologies.
No, not at all. It was quite a broad question. So, looking at obviously unitarisation, the statements that Surrey County Council are putting out are saying that we'll save between £1 and £46 million by doing that. That's one set of figures. I've seen others they pluck from the air elsewhere. But obviously, the hard work that officers are doing here, delivering cost savings, what impact is that going to have on the unitarisation piece? Because the numbers that we're talking about in this paper here are not insignificant. So what's the impact, and should Surrey County Council be taking account of the hard work of officers here, driving efficiency savings? Have they even considered the great work that's going on here? And also, it was a question around a barking mad idea to stop any assets over £25,000 being sold by this council before unitarisation. Would that have an impact on the hard work of the transformation programme?
So I'll do my best to answer all those if I can, Chair. Councillor Lee, thank you. So the financial assumptions that were drawn by the county and by the districts and boroughs in their modelling for the proposals for unitary status across Surrey as a county were based on information that was provided by the Section 151 officers. So that was very much a snapshot in time that was based on our financial strategies. Clearly, any savings or overspends or any kind of budget shift for any local authority, whether that be county or the districts and boroughs, between when that information is provided and when we reach unitary status, will have an impact on the efficiencies that you can make as a unitary. And whether that is a 2 or a 3 model, clearly there will be a financial impact there. So it's fair to say if we're making efficiencies now, you could argue that we're in a better place when that unitary authority comes forward, because there'll be less overheads, less revenue, ideally less capital reliance as well. So we're effectively getting ahead of unitarisation, you could say, by making sure that we are as lean and efficient as we possibly can be. I think in terms of the disposal of assets, there's a logic to disposing of assets which are not required by any entity or any authority to obtain a capital receipt. And I don't think that is irrational or a foolish idea. Ultimately, any asset that we hold which is not fit for us as an authority, that costs us, either that in terms of resource or in terms of finances, clearly there's a logic in disposing of that and taking the capital receipt, either to reduce our reliance on borrowing or actually to invest into other things. I believe that was it, Councillor Lee. Was there another element?
May I have a follow-up, Chair? Are you aware of any other local authority undergoing unitarisation that has agreed not to dispose of any asset over £25,000? And if you're not aware, could you find out for me, please, ideally before the next full council meeting?
I am not personally aware. Certainly I can ask Vicky Radford, our 151, to check with her colleagues to see if that is something that is being agreed across the other districts and boroughs.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, next I've got Councillor Nurmalkang, and then Councillor Rowlands, and then Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Savings are absolutely necessary to ensure a viable and workable balance sheet. and I thank the officers for doing all the hard work. One particular saying that I'd like to sort of have a further sort of knowledge of is unauthorised encampment stopped the on-call weekend service. Has there been any detrimental effect to the residents for not providing this service, and is there a backup for that?
That one falls to me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. So the unauthorised encampment service was a weekend service which provided corporate enforcement officers to respond to unauthorised encampments. So that is effectively a collection of gypsies or travellers effectively staying on our land. That was the extent of the service, or intended to be the extent of the service. In truth, it extended beyond that. So sometimes where there were incursions in other people's land, they also reacted to that as well. It was a seasonal service, so it ran from March all the way through until the end of September, I believe it was. So a 6-month duration, and officers were on call during that period. And also we had comms officers on call to make sure that we could share messaging with the general public. The actual data on incursions on our land demonstrated that actually it was a lot of money to spend for limited benefit. There is no obligation for us to deal with incursions on private land or on other people's land, including the County Council. So the decision was made that that was a prudent saving. I know that Councillor Wheeler was nodding her head in terms of detriment for us curtailing that service, but I believe that Councillor Wheeler might be referring to breaches of planning enforcement, which actually the service was never intended to cover. It was solely around unauthorised encampments. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to 1.6, have we any guarantee, the way it reads is that we moved to respond to a growing shortfall, and then we suddenly discovered that the whole financial situation had changed again, and that we were facing considerable levels of indebtedness. Have we any guarantee that won't repeat itself, and that the circumstances will again be apparent that urgent action will be occurred? But just the way it reads, it looks as though we could be faced in the future by another onslaught of similar to that. I wondered, Chairman, do you want me to go through the number of points I've got here, or come in later?
Sorry, we'll do them one at a time for now, if that's okay, Councillor Rowlands. Mrs Radford, I believe you're on, and you're probably going to want to answer that one.
Yep, thank you. I guess we only know what we know, and we know a lot more than what we did last year. So I think we as officers are comfortable with what we've got in our figures. We've done a lot of work. We've done a lot of base budget reviews, and as part of the transformation programme, it's really drawn out some innovative thinking and sort of changes that can happen within each service. So we're comfortable that there aren't going to be any more shocks coming from us as a council. We can't control what the government do. We can't control what world leaders do. We can't control what the economy does. But as far as we are concerned for ourselves, we don't think there will be any major shocks that we can control.
Thank you. Councillor Rowlands, how many questions have you got, sir? No, you go and ask another one now, because I've only got Councillor Wheeler after yourself.
Okay. 1.7, the way that I'm a bit puzzled about the way this has been worked out. Perhaps somebody might explain how this financial modelling has responded and its chances of being successful.
Mrs Radford again.
And with me while I just get that section.
Councillor Rowlands, can you switch your mic off, please?
Yeah, so I guess the financial modelling is just updating our MTFS, reviewing the costings that have been put forward by services, and we've done some really robust challenge on some of the ideas that have been put forward. And a lot bit realistic. And as Mr. Stevens said earlier, a lot of what we've put forward has already been achieved or committed to. And the executive councillors were involved in all those decision making as well. And so there was a lot of questions, a lot of review, and it's continuous review as well. So as part of our budget monitoring, we're going to be reviewing the delivery of those savings. We're going to be reporting them as part of the monitoring report. So there'll be a lot of transparency around each of those items against what's being delivered, partly to make sure there's no budget creep. So, things get added back into the budget, but also for councillors to understand the implications of what's been put forward financially and services. So there's a lot more information that's going to come on each of those. But it's just, I suppose financial modelling really is just around us pulling together the figures and monitoring continuously.
Thank you. You've got another one, Councillor Rowlands?
Yeah, looking at the 2.5, the theatre and the Heritage Centre, there seems to be a sort of element of hope rather than reality of financial solvency involved in those, which in other cases has not been met in the same way. I'd be interested in your comment on that. The hope that if all goes well, they're going to be able to meet the requirements of the budgetary plan.
Okay, thank you. I think Ms Stevens is going to speak, and then I think Ms McGubbins is going to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. I'm not going to steal Ms McCubbin's thunder on this one. My general comment would be that for a museum or a heritage service to achieve the efficiencies that we've asked for is a big ask, but we are absolutely committed to finding that in any way we reasonably can without impacting on the service there. And I know for the theatre, there are significant plans afoot to make sure that that is financially stable, and we have a cost-neutral approach to the theatre for this current year. And that is essentially all I wanted to say, other than that is a credit to the two lead officers for those areas. So clearly we are grateful to the heritage manager and the theatre manager as well for the work that they put in to come forward with plans that effectively make these discretionary services as cost neutral or low cost as we possibly can.
Thank you. Is it my turn now? Good evening, councillors and everyone. Realistically, I think what you said, Councillor Rowlands, is there is an element of accuracy because a lot of the things we're doing, we're planning for the future. We're making things better. We're changing the offer for people to hire. We're changing the sort of like the shows that we put on. We're trying to do things differently. We're de-risking the pantomime. And we've also got return soon to be announced people in the pantomime that will be a bigger draw, hopefully. So ticket sales we're hoping will increase, but a lot of these things we're putting in place now, but the actual return, if you like, on sort of the time and efforts expended in the beginning will only be seen later on. So at the moment, a lot of the work we're doing in both the Heritage Centre, Museum and at the theatre is all forecasting, and you will be able to report against that later on in the year. So I think that's really what I wanted to say on that, unless you've got any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Wheeler now.
Thank you. I had things are always timely, aren't they? I was stopped yesterday evening by a resident in the avenue to whom I was not related to raise concerns with me that they backed onto the recreation ground in the avenue, which for those of you that don't know runs between the avenue and the A30 and abuts where our leisure centre is. That particular recreation ground used to have a full-time, in my days I'm afraid I used to call him a parkie, but I don't know what the proper term is, a space maintenance person. And it's reduced already just to somebody coming in and blocking the recreation ground at night. And they raised concerns with me. I have asked them to raise it formally on the website and to let their local councillors know. Not that I'm shying away from responsibilities, but my own residents keep me quite busy. And they are experiencing extended antisocial behaviour already in the recreation ground. So although we haven't yet moved to the recreation ground not being locked at night, there have apparently been increased occasions when the recreation ground has not been locked at night. There have been people there with barbecues. There is a bylaw that says that no alcohol can be consumed within the recreation ground. And there have been occasions, and increased occasions recently, whereby residents have been challenged by people that were both inebriated, barbecuing, and there after dark. So I am concerned that some of these savings are, in the long run, likely to increase costs for the borough, because we have a clean-up cost, which is associated with that, as well as residential impact on residential amenity, particularly for those properties that abut the recreation ground. And I think, looking in here, one thing I can't see any savings on, I just wondered if there's any intention to save any funding for indoor sports and leisure centres. I can see that we're looking for partners for playgrounds, etc. But I just wondered if there was anything around indoor sports and leisure facilities. But I'd like a response, please, on whether or not we're kicking things down onto the long grass. And my second question, I'll sneak it in at the same time, was just in relation to Councillor Kang and about how some of the decisions we make now make other costs more expensive. I accept that it was just to deal with Gypsy and Traveller incursions, that fund, but it did give us access to corporate enforcement out of hours. And by not having corporate enforcement out of hours, instead of being able to do something preventative, we then have to do something retrospective, which invariably is more costly, takes longer, requires more officer time. So I am concerned that some of these savings are just likely to increase costs in other areas. Thank you.
Ms McGubbin, you can go for the first one.
Couldn't find the mute button then, apologies. Certainly, that is actually the first time I've heard of that ASB in London Road Rec, so I'd be really keen to hear from that person, because it's certainly not come to our attention, because we have, well, as I said, we're not aware of it, and that's something that I would certainly have been aware of. So if you could encourage them to get in touch, that would be wonderful.
I will. I have.
Thank you.
I'll do it again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mr Stevens will take the second point.
So there were two other points, weren't there, Councillor Wheeler? One was in relation to indoor sports and leisure and seeking efficiencies or income from that, which I'll leave to Sue in a second. The unauthorised encampments service, yes, we pushed the boundaries of that. No, we shouldn't have. It was intended to solely be for unauthorised encampments and nothing more. It's not a service that many authorities provide anymore. It was an uncomfortable choice to curtail it, but the data demonstrated that we didn't have sufficient unauthorised encampments to justify the expense. The fundamental challenge we have is if we don't make efficiencies from services like that, which are discretionary, what we're looking at is greater reductions in staffing levels, which means greater levels in service provision Monday to Friday during our normal working hours. And, you know, Sally Kipping has already talked about the choose to leave. That would mean that we would not fill more vacant posts, and it would also mean we'd have to make uncomfortable choices around losing staff through other means such as redundancy. So whilst I appreciate it's difficult, and whilst that does mean we are reactive, unfortunately there is a real challenge for us. And, you know, those losses of service would also relate to corporate enforcement as well as other areas. So you would find there'd be a reduction of staffing potentially within that service during Monday to Friday.
And I'm coming back. Got Murray and Victoria. Over to you, indoor sports.
Thank you. So indoor sports, primarily our indoor sports are Places Leisure and the Leisure Centre, which are controlled, if you will, by the contract that we're in with Places Leisure. So we wouldn't really be able to seek savings as such from there. What we have, and they do provide for us though, is an annual grant which we use to support initiatives around outdoor leisure primarily, in fairness, for others to enjoy. What we have done with some of our outdoor sports is we have looked, so for example, the 3G pitch this year is about to be resurfaced. So we've actually looked at the pricing schedules for that, because essentially it will be a brand new pitch. So we're looking at every single option where we can control and make changes. So in essence, I think I'm saying yes to your question, but probably more so on the outdoor sports than the indoor sports.
Thank you. Right, so I've got Councillor Wheeler wanted to come back, I think. Then I've got Councillor Rowlands, and I'm going to call it because we've obviously got a tight schedule tonight, and I'm going to try and keep to the timings. Councillor Wheeler first.
First and foremost, thank you very much for the responses. I do think we just need to be cognitive that the majority of incursions and the majority of antisocial, unlawful behaviour tends to happen at weekends, and it tends to happen at weekends for a really good reason.
And I can come back on that one. The other element which I omitted to say was generally our powers are quite slow and laborious when it comes to unauthorised encampments, especially out of hours where we need to seek effectively a court hearing and then move forward to serve notice on that incursion. The police have far superior powers to us, and where we were intervening in relation to unauthorised encampments, we found that actually the police powers were far more effective in moving on that encampment than we could ever be. So that was another justification as to why that service was curtailed.
Thank you. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Councillor Lee, because Councillor Rowlands, you have had a few questions. I'll ask Councillor Lee, and I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Rowlands, with one question.
Yeah, it was an important point that Councillor Wheeler raised around parks. From my previous service as a councillor when we managed parks, we actually found that the police were not very happy about parks being locked up, because it meant that once miscreants had got in there, it was far harder for them to get in. So if we are locking the parks up, we're providing the police with keys so they can easily get in, because obviously we're asking them to jump over fences and things like that. And whilst I'm sure in the pursuit of serious criminals they're happy to, if it's in pursuit of someone being annoying, we probably want to strike the balance. And we actually found that leaving the parks unlocked actually reduced crime, ironically.
It's a very good point, Councillor Lee. No, we don't provide keys to the police. I don't believe we ever have. I'm sure Sue McCubbin will shake her head aggressively if I'm wrong there. But no, we haven't. They've never been asked for, and I think it would probably be challenging, because ultimately with the shift patterns police have and the number of officers within the borough, one set of keys, multiple officers, that would always be a fundamental challenge. So I take your point entirely.
Councillor Rowlands.
Yes, there's an interesting section dealing with staff morale, and although I think it's quite competently dealt with, I think there possibly is room for more work to be done in identifying how the whole programme of reduction and cuts, in order to come within budgetary range, are actually being met with. And I think the council would commend greater efforts being made in that direction to offset the effect of necessary, how any reductions of these kinds are going to affect the staff. But also point out in passing that there's itemised a training and allowance underspend for ourselves, which seems a shame that we're swooping in on that in order to try and balance the books.
I'm going to go to Ms Kipping.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Rowlands, for your question. You're absolutely right in suggesting that the retention and morale of staff is one of our key priorities over the next 12 months. We are working actively on that, and I believe I'm due to take a report into the effectiveness of our people strategy towards the end of the year. As I mentioned earlier, we have just had an all-staff survey. What we intend to do over the next few months is to follow that up with pulse surveys, so that we really keep our finger on the pulse, if you like, of where we are with staff morale, so that if we see that it does begin to dip, we can do something about that straight away. We are incredibly fortunate with our staff in that we have very open and transparent communications. You'll see in the report there's a principle that staff know first. We run regular all-staff briefings. We take questions from staff at those briefings and answer them as fully as we possibly can. So we do have a culture of very open communication between the senior officers and the staff, and we are confident that staff would and do raise issues to us as and when they arise. But you're absolutely right in saying we need to keep our finger on the pulse, and that's exactly what we intend to do over the next few months. And I would welcome any councillor to join us at Employment Committee later in the year when we're due to discuss this topic in some detail.
Thank you. I'm going to call it there because I want to try and keep to the schedule, because obviously we've got quite a long schedule tonight. Thank you to the team for pulling that together. I know other councillors said it and I always end up forgetting, so I'm going to say it now. Thank you, because obviously there's a lot of work that's gone into this by a number of officers. So thank you for all your diligence and all the hard work you've put into this. Okay, so that takes us to item 6, which is the end of year performance report. And that's you, Miss Kipping.
It is indeed. So my service is responsible for the presentation of the end of year annual report. This is the end of year report for 2024-25. Councillors will be aware that the annual plan drives our performance and links very closely to our budget. And we use the plan for appraisals and objectives for officers across the council. This annual plan was set with budget constraints in mind, so we knew we had there were financial issues when we began to draw up the plan. What we didn't know was the extent of those issues at that stage. It does show, the annual plan that we've produced this year, that our performance, despite a worsening financial situation, the subsequent transformation programme, which of course we've just heard about, and latterly the local government reorganisation, officers across the council have managed to consistently deliver what they said they would, as well as continuing to deliver business as usual. We're really very pleased to advise the committee that, as can be seen in the report, 83% of projects were delivered, 13% are in progress, and leaving only 2% that were not delivered. I wanted this committee to be aware that this is travelling on to executive next week, so all your comments and feedback can be considered by them. Ms Bainbridge and I will capture that and will reproduce that faithfully. So just open to any questions.
Thank you. Very quickly, did we need to do any? Thank you. So I'm making sure I'm doing the procedural stuff. Okay, so I'm going to say it now. Thank you. I know every year you pull this together and there's lots of information. I know in the chair's briefing we say, can you do this? The graphs never look like what they do when you do create them. They suddenly go completely skew with. So thank you for pulling this paperwork together. Okay, so questions. Councillor Cope, Councillor Glowett and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the percentage of planning appeals that being successful, as detailed on page 20 of this section, being 46%, which is well below 65%, which was the target. I just wondered, is there a particular reason for that? And I'm just thinking that obviously there's presumably a cost associated to the council in defending these appeals, and if we're losing more than half of them, that may be a cause for concern.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Cope, for your question. It's fair to say, I mean, looking at quarter 1, quarter 2 and quarter 3, we were well below the 65% threshold. As a team, we have looked at that in terms of, vetting all reasons for refusal. So every week now we meet up as a DM group, development management team, and we go through all the reasons for refusal. And that's taken some time to filter through in terms of our figures actually improving. And I think you can see in quarter 4 where we're at 73%, that sort of procedure that we put in place has improved. it's to note as well, in the last quarter just gone, we're almost like 80% in terms of in time, but also just to note, it's in the new annual plan in terms of how we record appeals in the future. So we're now following the new government sort of guidance on that. So where you have more than 10% appeals allowed, then you're doing really badly. So how it's calculated, it's based on 10% allowed against all the decisions you make. So you've got to divide all the allowed appeals against what's been granted or refused over the course of a year. So if you took our current calculation at the moment at 46%, we would be at 2.2%, which is much less than the 10% government requirement. So we are doing pretty well. I know these figures are quite stark in terms of what's on the paper, but we are making provisions internally to improve that going forwards, and also we are within the new government targets as well going forwards, and that will be shown in the next update when the annual plan comes to this chamber in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Gower.
Yes, my question is about the green flags to the various parks, and we'd committed to add further green flag application annually, but because of the transformation programme, we're no longer going to apply for green flag status. Now, is this because of the cost of the actual application, or is it because we're not going to keep our parks up to the standard required?
Ms McCubbins, you're up again.
I am, thank you. Thank you, great question. We have committed to retaining the standards that were achieved to be able to get the green flags in the first place in the parks that will no longer be going through the application for. The application process itself is costly, and when we're adding to it annually, the costs were thousands. So that was the process that we're going to stop, but the standards remain in place.
Thank you.
It's good to hear that. Thanks very much.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And I totally agree that 83% completion rate is high, and it's a big improvement on last year in nearly every respect. So very pleased to see that, and very pleased that this is the first genuine Lib Dem annual plan and ever for the council. So it's great to see it having such great results. But as was mentioned earlier, in this year, it was the year where the financial debt interest doom loop was discovered, and despite that, there was still a really high performance. So yeah, onto I've got a few questions, but I'll just take one specific one at the moment. Page 90, and it's about the 5-year housing land supply, because I think this is a key hurdle that the council is going to have to address in the next year or so before it disappears. So the question is basically, what's the plan on this? I know that we can't do anything until the local plan is adopted, but is there a timetable? Is there a way to get to a 5-year housing land supply? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, I mean, in terms of our provision and proposals going forward, we are doing extensive site searches and looking at, sites which could come forwards. And we are we put out to the market in terms of call for sites, and so that's a continuous piece of work which our policy team are undertaking at the moment in terms of the strategic land supply data. I know our current 5-year housing supply is about 3 years at the moment, and we do need more sites, and that site search is ongoing, really. And as once the local plan is adopted, that assists us somewhat, and that's going to go through the process accordingly. As you know, the local plan examination has been delayed because of the change of inspectors for the plan, and once those dates have been confirmed, the examination will go ahead. But that's where we are in terms of our current position at the moment.
Can I just ask one quick supplementary on that? I know it's speculation, but could you speculate about what effect this might have on the greenbelt in the borough?
Yeah, so in terms of impact on the greenbelt, you could get more speculative developments coming forwards, and if it's within the right location, it's sustainable, it's meets the housing need, and also it provides a benefit in terms of the greenbelt. Then these schemes are likely to be allowed at appeal. As you know, Councillor Wilson, we had a recent appeal at Grovend, which was refused by Planning Committee, but then it went to appeal because of the changes of the MPPF. It was allowed. So it makes our sort of basis to refuse applications more difficult, and the central government are taking quite a hard line in terms of greenbelt sites at the moment to actually allow that to go forward.
Yeah, sorry, I worded my question wrong. I was just thinking about to create a 5-year housing land supply, will that mean that the greenbelt we'd have to basically take areas out of the greenbelt to get that far?
Yes, if it's feasible in terms of the spatial strategy, and also those sites are feasible to bring forward housing, because as you know, we are governed by the SPA where it controls in terms of where residential development can actually come forward. But yes, if it meets the criteria, then yes, it's highly likely that we would see more greenbelt sites coming forward for housing.
No one else had their hand up, so I'm going to ask a question while others think of some. Yes, page 101, it's reference to Heath Scene. So obviously I know we're stopping the Heath Scene magazine for the doorsteps, I totally get that. I think I mentioned it at the Chair's briefing, I just want to reiterate it here. There's 36,000 households in Surrey Heath, and currently we've got 3,000 people have signed up. Now, whether that's 3,000 households or 3,000 people, I don't know if we actually know that, but that's only 8.3% of the total population. So my concern is that's a tool which we are able to send out so people can see it and what's going on, but it's not getting to everybody's doorstep. So what plans have we got in place to try and increase that?
Thank you. So as part of the communications review, we are dedicating some of our communications resource to try and improve our digital reach through the use of not just our residents' newsletter, but also through more attractive social media, such as videos and so on. And we use social media extensively to reach our residents. And our feedback is that because we can update that in a very contemporary way, residents are becoming more reliant on it to know about the business of the council and what the council does. It is something we do need to improve on, we certainly need to work on, and it is a key target for this year. We are dedicating resources to that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Hoft and Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at page 107, the customer satisfaction rating with the contact centre, noticing that the trend appears to be going downwards. Target was 90%, and it's sort of been dropping quarter by quarter. I just wondered whether there was any reason for that, whether it's affected by staffing changes or opening hours, or if there was any sort of correlation as to why that might be.
Thank you, Chair. Again, that's an excellent question, and one that the Customer Services Manager and I were discussing only this week. The interesting thing is that the number of complaints has remained quite stable, and so there haven't been staffing changes within the contact centre. So the service that the contact centre are providing has remained stable. That hasn't been affected by the transformation programme at all. And the operatives in the contact centre are excellent officers, very highly skilled. It's a very stable team, and they've been there for a very long time, most of them. So our feeling is that it's more that people are becoming more dissatisfied generally and that expectations are higher because we haven't seen an increase in complaints. But it is something that is concerning me, and it is something I will certainly be keeping an eye on over the next 12 months.
Thank you. That was actually my next question, and I think we're bringing the complaints is coming as a paper to one of these meetings in the work programme, so it's obviously something we can discuss then. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I was an alternate short notice, so you'll have to forgive me. I've probably got a dozen or two, so I'll start rolling through them. So I think we'll start page 16 and 17 on the report to start with.
Councillor Lee, are you giving the page number for the actual report, are you? Just so
yes, there's some big numbers top right when I look at it in the landscape. So on page 16, we've got household recycling and composted report in arrears to follow. Do we know when that's likely to land? I do appreciate it actually needs to be calculated, so it's just when it would land. I think the same question for on page 17 for residual household waste.
I think they were published last week at the Joint Waste Solutions.
Oh, my colleague is saying to me they've been published. Perhaps as late information, which would be welcome.
Joint Waste Solutions.
On Joint Waste Solutions. The one I wanted to dig into was page 18 of the report, which is dry recycling contamination. My first question is, who is responsible for reducing the contamination? My gut feel is it's probably residents, but let's find that one out. And two, it would be interesting to have a bit more of an understanding as to how we are, A, looking at that, but B, looking to deliver that modal shift, because contamination in dry recycling going up, to me, doesn't seem quite right, and the narrative around perhaps weather events doesn't seem entirely to correlate with that, because you've got the highest in the last 3 months, and I think it's been particularly drier the last 3 months of that year. So it's just getting an understanding of that first, and then I'll come back for the next questions.
I think they get sick of me asking this question, exactly the same thing when we do Chair's briefing, because looking at the figures, they're really high targets and they're going to be really difficult to meet. I think Mr Stevens is going to answer.
I will certainly try, Chair. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lee. Okay, so let's start with the recycling data. There's always a lag with the KPIs, not because we don't have the information to hand, but essentially it needs to be validated by DEFRA. So we understand what the tip rates are. Joint Waste Solutions monitor that quite closely under their supervision of the Joint Waste contract. But ultimately, it's not ratified for DEFRA for quite some time. So there's always an inevitable lag in terms of our recycling data and our residual waste data as well. So the tonnage around those just takes a while to come through. In relation to dry recycling contamination and who's responsible for that, yes, you are absolutely right. It's the residents that are responsible for making sure there isn't contamination within the recyclate, because it is quite a costly enterprise. Then ultimately you could have a full refuse collection vehicle that is a full refuse collection vehicle of recyclate that is rejected and therefore goes into the residual waste stream because of contamination. And that could be multiple sources of contamination. We have the Surrey Environment Partnership, who, as you are aware, transferred from Joint Waste Solutions back to the County Council in April of this year, who are responsible for waste reduction and recycling initiatives. So we work in conjunction with them to bring forward initiatives that we think collaboratively will reduce contamination of recyclate, encourage recycling and encourage waste reduction in the first instance, because that's the most effective measure. Not having that waste in the system in the first place is by far the best way forward. But in conjunction to that, our JWS colleagues also try to ensure that recyclate contamination is reduced so far as practicable through our own messaging that comes out through our comms service. Additionally, AMI are responsible for tracking contamination of recyclate. So when we go through a process of doing that, and that is periodic, it's not an ongoing process, we do then put things like hangers onto bins or do an educational campaign ourselves, irrespective of what Surrey Environment Partnership are doing. I hope that answers the question. There was a third one, wasn't there, in relation to garden waste, I believe, Councillor Lee?
No, I think you've neatly covered those ones, which is good. So moving on to the next one. So the next one is on page 20, planning refusals. So I think having the second bite of the cherry following Councillor Copes. obviously what we don't want to get into is a situation where the council rolls over and has its tummy tickled, providing permission for planning developments that are actually inappropriate and should have strong grounds for refusal. I just wanted to flag that as a marker there in terms of understanding the refusals and also the reasons why refusals are overturned. So it's looking at changes in legislation. It's not really fair, particularly on that planning application that yourself and Councillor Wilson referenced, to really class that within those stats as a failure, because that's a pretty obscure piece of planning legislation, and at the time you'd have reasonably expected that refusal to have been upheld. You've then got this obscure piece of legislation, so I certainly wasn't aware of it. Officers clearly weren't aware of it. So I think we need to be a little bit careful of the baby and the bathwater on this particular KPI. I've certainly heard from Councillor Wheeler, who I tend to look to as a bit of an expert on planning, and I think we have to be slightly careful when we refuse applications. It's more about the material grounds for refusal that we put in. So it's looking at that prep work behind the scenes, because if we've got an officer recommendation to permit, but there are actually material grounds to refuse, and some of these are subjective. They're not objective, they're subjective. So you can have material grounds to permit and material grounds to refuse. I've sat on committees in the past where they've overturned every officer recommendation. So it is, and I don't think we lost any of the appeals on that either. So it's looking at that strength there. So it's just making sure we don't straitjacket ourselves into permitting everything, because that wouldn't be a service to our residents. So it was more an observation there. It was then picking up on a point around Heathsea. I think it is the right thing to do to move on from Heathsea. I think it provides that legitimate space for local newspapers that we know are under huge attack at the moment. And for us to subsidise a magazine that directly competes with them, I'm not quite sure that that's the great space to be. And also, we're elected politicians, and you know what? Part of our job as elected politicians is to communicate with our electorate, and we should bloody well get on and do that. So, rather than worrying about a loss of Heathsea, let's see locally elected politicians properly communicating with their residents and filling that void.
Just for the record, I wasn't suggesting we carry on with the Heathsea, because I understand why we shouldn't. What my concern is the fact that there are some people that don't get that now, and the way they get the newsletter, which we are sending out, is by email, and we are only covering a very small percentage of it. So that was my only concern, because I think we can both agree that a lot of us do a lot of posting on social media, and a lot of our residents get to see that. So I wasn't saying we need to have the magazine. I think it's getting the word out to those that aren't necessarily as social media literate.
There is nothing to stop elected politicians delivering leaflets.
But they would be very slanted in what they come out, though, would they not? They wouldn't necessarily be giving the residents a truthful information.
Well, we don't necessarily want to get into the lie that's been exposed and had to be corrected by the Borough Council this morning from a particular politician.
I was talking about across the board, but okay, I wouldn't suggest that the borough would want information, the residents would want information specifically from political leaflets. I was suggesting the information that comes from the council. But as far as social media goes...
You speak for yourself on your leaflets, not for us.
Okay, fair enough. The social media that we are sending out with, not so much Instagram, but certainly with the Facebook page, etc., I know is really good, and it pops up in my feed and I share it. So I get that. It was just a concern that 8.3% of the residents are now the only ones seeing the information, but that's fine. Okay, so did you have I'm not going to come back to you because I've got two.
I think a point of correction there. More than 8.3% of residents receive information, because you've got the reach of the Facebook page, which reaches a lot more than 8.3% of residents. So I think we need to be fair with those stats.
Okay, that is a fair point. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Wheeler first because she hasn't spoken on this section, then Councillor Wilson.
Again, mine's a question really around robbing Peter to pay Paul. We talk a lot in this paper about increasing biodiversity. Going back to a point that was raised earlier this evening by the member of the public that came in to speak, and also by myself, in terms of reducing funding to deal with flood issues and Environment Agency. We had a wonderful plan for the Chobham Sands, which included a retention pond, which would have increased biodiversity within that area. As I said before, that's been scaled right back. The funding for that project has been scaled right back. There is still no date for that project. I'm not really sure that we're looking at every opportunity for biodiversity, if I'm completely honest. And then we're not looking at the cross benefit of other plans that have been scaled back in order to save costs. Thank you.
I think, is that going to be Mr. Chinaya?
I think just in terms of B&G in general, I mean, as you know, legislation came out and central government set above 10%, which all planning applications have to adhere to. They submit a B&G assessment, and as part of the application, they need to provide a B&G requirements. In terms of adopting that, we do bring that forward as part of developments going forward. So I think all the schemes which we are currently assessing, we go through a very vigorous process with Surrey Wildlife Trust, who are our main consultee and provides comments on that. So I think in terms of that, it covers the planning application side. I think the council are looking at ways to enhance biodiversity in the borough going forwards. So I believe there's adequate mitigation legislation which we're looking to adopt in terms of B&G going forwards, really. So I don't know if I answered your question, Councillor Wheeler, in terms of that.
No, it doesn't. My question really is where we've had schemes, particularly those that relate to flooding, that would have, one would assume, given it would change the nature, it would give a wetlands area that would increase incredibly well to our biodiversity net gain. We are reducing that funding, so we're having a heavily reduced scheme, and we're losing the opportunity to really embrace rather than follow legislative guidelines in terms of B&G.
I think, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I don't think we actually said we're reducing funding. This is basically funding which has been provided by EA. EA have basically a source of projects they actually fund throughout the course of a year. I know it's been going for many years in terms of this. We're in the hands of the EA. As officers, we are in consultation with them, and we will continue that dialogue with them until they are fit to provide that funding for that project.
Sorry, I understood from the speaker earlier this evening that we have reduced £40,000 from our funding contribution in that particular area, and I've also been told by our lead flood officer that we've reduced the funding that is available from Surrey Heath Borough Council for the SANGs in Chobham. So if that information is incorrect, then please do correct me, but I understood that's why the speaker came in this evening, and that's certainly my understanding in relation to the Chobham SANGs.
I think from the question today, it's about the funding which is available, and we need extra funding from the EA to bring forward these projects. So that's the position that we are in terms of bringing these projects forward.
Okay, Mr. Stevens will dig better. Right, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lee, did you have some more questions? I'm conscious of time. Did you have a couple more questions, did you say?
I'll just go with one. So I'll go with a tech question just to deliver.
I'll give Councillor Wilson first, and I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. It's so page 87 of the main report, which is 5.1, and page 89 actually. It's about the pay and display machines that have been installed in the village car parks. So I've been using them. I think it's great, and I see that on page 89. I wonder, maybe it's related, that all of the parking usage targets have been exceeded, and especially in the second half of the year. And I was just wondering what the feedback had been from the public about these machines.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We haven't specifically gone out and sought feedback but my understanding from the parking manager is that they've been well received. They're certainly a substantial upgrade on the previous equipment there, and the fact that you can pay through multiple means is also a positive. So my understanding is there hasn't been any negative commentary in relation to the machines. It's been largely positive, but as I say, we haven't intentionally gone out to canvass the public on that. We knew they were an improvement, and that seems to be the case.
Yeah, I did intentionally go out and spoke to people queuing up in Bagshot to use it, and yeah, they all said the same to me. So I think it's a good improvement. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I spent some time chatting to residents at, I think it's the Knoll Road car park, and they were overjoyed by how easy it was. You know, it reads their number plate. When they pay, they don't need to find their ticket. They just put their reg in, and they touch their card, and they're out. So, and I thought, you know what, I'll try it for myself. So I actually park there rather than using my free parking. Free parking is not in the council's car park, elsewhere. And they're right, it's really simple and great. So I think, Nick, praise and thanks to the parking team who've got that scheme implemented. I know previously I expressed some concerns about it, but I'd like to say for the record, my concerns have been unfounded. It's been a real good scheme delivery. I think perhaps I was tainted by some of the Camberley Observed comments.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I think it's fair to say that our parking manager is a hard taskmaster, and he always feels that there's always room for improvement, and continuous improvement is within his mantra. This fills me with a little bit of apprehension about the fact you could get caught at a barrier and not leave, but actually there's a step further you can take. You don't necessarily have to use the machines at Knoll Road or Main Square to pay. You can actually tap and pay when you leave at the barrier, which is an even bigger convenience as far as I'm concerned.
And I think that is a real credit. As I say, I think I was probably tainted by some of the negativity from Camberley Eye and Camberley Observed, which has clearly been unfounded. So thank you to the hard work of officers. Thank you, because I think that needs to be positively called out. On to my actual question now. So it's page 101. Humour for everyone that likes to reference 101 and where they want to put me, but that's fine. It was 2.7. So I note there, as a big fan of the hard-working ICT team, normally I'm praising. This one I'm just asking for an update. It says on track for implementation by July 2025 and the milestone target. The end-year update says on track for delivery in July 2025. So just wanted to get a feel. IT projects are not to be rushed. They're to be implemented in good time. So if timescales slip, that's okay as long as there's a valid reason. So I just wanted to get a feel there for how that was going.
Ms. Kipping.
Thank you. Yes, it has been delivered.
Magic. Thank you, IT team. Unsung heroes are the glue that holds this council together, important people. So please tell them to watch this bit where I say thank you. They are the unsung heroes. They're the glue that holds this council together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I'm going to go on to item 7. If you do not wish to hang around for the rest of the riveting points, you can go. And I know we discussed this before the meeting. Thank you for your time. Thank you for pulling everything together, you and the team. Thank you. Okay, so in the absence of Councillor McIntyre, I'm guessing Ms Radford is going to present the end of year finance and budget outturn.
I am, yes. Okay, so this is the outturn position for 2024-25, the year end at 31st of March this year. You'll note that the format is similar to the monitoring reports that have been coming this year, and it's got more detail than you would have seen in this report in past years. It also very closely links to the agenda item on the Audit Standards and Risk Committee on next week's agenda, where there's more detail on the Treasury Management side on that particular meeting. But the capital section is duplicated because of the way capital feeds into Treasury. So it's important to show that link a bit more on that agenda item. So in terms of the report tonight, I will, there's quite a lot of detail in there, so I'll just pick up on the key points. So page 127 of the agenda pack shows the summary of costs of the revenue account compared to Q3 projections. So services were 1.6 million under budget after reserve transfers, which is an increase to what we projected at Q3. So it's a real credit as we've said many times tonight on other reports, to services for taking on board the financial position coming in under budget. And that's alongside some of the one-off windfall amounts that we had in 24-25. Most of that is due to correcting the accounting treatment of some items. For instance, smoothing rent-free periods, which we've identified in the report. The report and appendices contain a lot more details on each service and the key variances. In terms of indirect costs of service, which is mainly interest, it's obviously been well reported throughout the year. Although we did report higher interest receipts as an outturn compared to what we'd previously projected. We had a small reduction in minimum revenue provision as well, and that was due to the review undertaken in the year, which meant that we had slightly overpaid in past years, and we were able to take that as a saving this year. Moving on to reserves, because of the reduced overall expenditure, less needed to be drawn down from reserves, which is obviously putting the council in a better positive position moving forward in the MTFS. In terms of the capital programme, it outturned at 5.5 million, which is far less than the estimated amount and lower than the Q3 amount. And this is partly due to a number of schemes that have been reviewed and they've been reprofiled, and those are all identified in the report. And a number of schemes have been completed, so the money can be released from the programme. So these are detailed in paragraph 2.3 and 2.4 in the supplementary item. As these schemes were approved to be included by the executive, removing them is also an executive function. So councillors are asked to recommend those scheme changes to the executive. The other recommendations are as detailed in the report. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Radford, for the report and all the detail. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you for the report. These reports are getting clearer and clearer. But there was a point that you mentioned just then. It's on page 129, paragraph 1.12, and the fourth bullet point about straightlining of lease income. So I just want to check I've got this right. So if the council let out a property and for 10 years and the first 2 years were rent-free, then previously we were saying we got no rent from that for the first 2 years. But actually what we do now is we add up all the rent over the 10 years, so the 8 years where they're paying, divide that by 10 and say we got that every year. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. That's the correct accounting treatment that we should have been following previously as well.
Right, and that was a big positive variance. Great. Can I slip in another really quick question? It's page 142. There was a payment made for debt restructuring advice, which again was obviously an important change in year that made a big positive difference. Is there scope for any more restructuring of the debt?
Not that we're aware of. We obviously did get a reduction in our interest rate at that time, so it was still it was a competitive interest rate before. So that deal came to us from the provider of the loan, so they were looking to change how it looked on their books. So unlikely, I would say, but never say never.
Great, thanks. If it's okay, I'll squeeze in another question later, but I'm happy to let other people go first.
Thanks. It actually sort of builds on Councillor Wilson's first question. Do we account for any break clauses in our leases? So obviously we're spreading the income over, say, a 10-year period, but it may be that some of our leases have a break clause in favour of the tenant after 5 years. Are those accounted for in the numbers at all, or does that just create a variance if a break event happens?
Because we smooth it out over the period, it would all kind of come out in the wash. So for the techies amongst you, the other side of that entry is on the balance sheet, which would then get written off if the tenant left. So we're sort of required just to kind of spread it out based on the information that we know.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, did you say you had another question?
Oh, yes, sorry, I should have been looking up the page. Page 133, and I think this is the key item about the reserves. So it looks like the closing balance on the general earmarked reserves, so that's reserves that can be used, basically, because you describe how the specific reserves potentially can't be used. So it's 14 million, and we're going through it at 8 million a year. So, and the reserves, these figures are not cash in the bank because they've already been spent on the previous administration. So every time we transfer out of reserves, that increases the debt overall. So the debt payments go up, and it looks like we've got less than 2 years left from this, from the end of March 2025. So I guess the question is this a doom loop, that we borrow more, interest rates go up more, and we get to zero reserves quicker?
We can only borrow up to our capital financing requirement. So what our internal borrowing is, and I think from memory, that's about 15 million. So for long-term purposes. In terms of the reserves position, this is as at the 31st of March. When we bring the next monitoring report to committee, we will have included the impact of the transformation programme that is over and above what we'd already included in the MTFS. So that obviously, you know, there's a benefit there that's currently not included in those figures. So that was obviously only at that point in time. So councillors will get a better perspective at the next meeting of the overall position on the MTFS, which is positive. But yes, you're right. It does show, in line with what we presented at the MTFS, that we would be short of those usable reserves during 26-27. But I suppose a precursor of what's to come, given the transformation programme presented earlier and the up-to-date information that we've got pre-fair funding review from the government. I think, you know, we can shift into 27-28, obviously, when we will no longer exist as an authority, given the current timescales. So the position is moving all the time, but it is better than what's shown in here, because obviously this was as at 31st of March, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. And it's getting more and more accurate as we go on as well. And it just shows how important realising all of the transformation programme is to try and meet that target. So anytime we want to, as it says in the report for that, anytime we want to sort of remove items from the transformation programme, we have to find something at least equal to it to put back in. Great, thanks, understood.
I've got a question which I wrote down, and I didn't actually ask it for the transformation, but it's as you're here, and it's relating to the money. It comes back to capital receipts. Can you, and I know I asked this question at the chair's briefing, capital receipts that are received, so the stuff that we are selling, when that money comes in, where does that go? Because I know we talked about it being against the transformation budget. How does that work out?
Yeah, okay, so we can only use capital receipts for certain things. Capital programme, repaying debt, and there's a special concession from the government that councils can use capital receipts for transformation or, you know, investor save, things like that. So if we intend to use that, and we did put a policy in the budget item, you know, we can submit a request or a kind of information item to the government to say we're intending to use those flexibilities. So again, a bit techie. Capital receipts will stay as capital receipts, and if we spend money on transformation, that is a revenue cost, so that will stay in revenue. And then there'll be a bit of, for want of a better phrase, finance jiggery-pokery in the background to allow those revenue costs to be funded from those capital receipts.
Is that a technical term, jiggery-pokery?
Well, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go Councillor Lee, then Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chair. Page 129, 1.2, bullet point 2, in relation to the JWS overspend in relation to the contract dispute. Is that the only overspend we're expecting in that area, or would we expect more?
Stevens, I think.
This is me. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lee. So there is only so much that I can provide by way of information on this, but as you'll understand, we are in legal dispute with our current waste contractor. There is clearly a cost associated with that, and whilst that is unfortunate, we do feel that we have a strong basis for our legal position, and we do not feel that our contractor have a comparable strength in their legal position. We are going through a process at the moment of dialogue in relation to their claims and ours, so our claims and their counterclaims, if you like. And until that is resolved, it is likely that those legal costs will continue, unfortunately.
So I have two follow-up questions. I don't want to push this into part two, so if you're not able to answer them, then I fully understand and respect that. I'm all for democracy and keeping things in the public domain, but if you feel that I've asked a question that's overstepped the mark and say that's not going to be answered, I fully respect that. So two questions. Are any of the other partners within JWS incurring legal fees? And is there a more or less than 50% chance we're ultimately going to recover those fees?
I can answer the first question. The second one is a matter of legal interpretation, and clearly our defence team feel we have a very strong position. There is obviously a counter perspective to that as well, as you'll understand. In relation to the sharing of legal costs, yes, they are shared equally across the joint contract authority, so we're all incurring similar costs in relation to this particular dispute.
Thank you. I won't ask. I've got a couple that I'm thinking about, but I won't ask them because I don't want to compromise your position in the council. So thank you for accommodating me that far. Thank you.
And just to clarify, this 440,000 is just the overspend for Surrey Heath. There's an equal amount with other districts and boroughs.
That's correct.
Wow, okay. Councillor Cope.
Thanks. Just got a question on the interest receivable. Obviously, there's a positive variance there, but why was the budget for investment income £100,000 on a portfolio balance of 25.5 million? Because that is a very, very low interest rate.
I can't answer why the budget was 100,000, but what I can say is that over the last year we've implemented some relatively robust cash flow projecting models, and as we've seen as we've gone throughout the year, I think even in the first, definitely the second quarter report, we had updated those projections. So yeah, I can't answer. I wasn't here when the budget was set, but certainly moving forward, and what's included in the MTFS are more robust budgets based on our anticipated cash flows and assumptions around interest rates.
Thank you. I've got 2 minutes. Any more questions? Going once, going twice, gone. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Radford, for your report. You don't have to hang around if you don't want to. I need to do 2 recommendations. Do I need to do
the recommendations on page 4 of the supplement?
And the previous paper as well?
Page 4 of the supplement captures everything.
Okay, fine. So page 4 of the supplement gives you our recommendations. Are we happy to agree those recommendations? Page 4 of the supplement, that was the God, I've got so many different papers here. Hang on one second. Yeah.
Councillor Lee, it's the one with track changes on.
So it's the 24th.
Well, I can't see from here.
I can't actually open it on the ModGov, so that's a pain in the bum.
Don't mind.
Yeah. Have your laptop. Anything on here top secret? Which page are the recommendations on, ready?
So it's page 4.
Thank you, that's right, because I can't open it on mine. Page 4. No, is it not? That's page 4.
Oh, sorry, page... Is that page 5?
5?
I think so. Is the one where it says recommendation at the bottom page? It's down as page 4 for me.
Oh, got it. No, it's fine. Because yours is really small, isn't it? God blooming Henry.
Good eyes.
Good idea, myself. Right, sorry, so recommendations. To provide any comments to the executive and support recommendations that little one, spend against the approved revenue budget for the end of the year, outturn 24-25 be noted. 2, carry forward the revenue budgets from 24-25 and 25-26 be agreed. 3, the proposed reserve transfers to fund the overspend and noted and endorsed. The updated reserves position for 24-25 be noted. The reprofiling and the capital programme be as reported in paragraphs 2.3 to 2.4 and shown in the appendix be agreed. And I'm assuming that's the final one. The releasing of the capital programme budgets detailed in 2.3 no longer required be agreed. Yes, Councillor Lee.
I think Councillor Glowett beat me, plus she does maths, so she's competent.
Is there? Oh, there is. Sorry, yeah, no. The Treasury Management Portfolio closing balance is to be noted. Thank you. That was on the second page, wasn't it? Yes, sorry. So the last one, 7. The Treasury Management Portfolio closing balance is to be noted. Are we? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Chair, we've heard a lot this evening about the improvements of the financial documents we've got, and particularly the hard work that Vicky and her team have put in. Would it be too naughty for me to propose perhaps a line thanking officers for the step change in financial reporting? Because I think when you've got that bigger change, it's nice for us as a team to put it on record. I thought it would be quite a positive one.
Okay. What I'm going to suggest, with your agreement, is that as chair, I sent a relevant email to the team saying exactly that on behalf of the committee.
My suggestion was put it into the minutes, formally record it, because it's a great thing, isn't it? That huge amount of work. I think it's really positive.
Yeah, sorry, not as a point, but yeah, we can make it. We can certainly make a note in the minutes. But I will also send an email.
Absolutely. So I think this committee welcomes the step change improvement in financial reporting, and I think just put it because they've worked so hard. I think it's nice when people really exceed expectations, and we've heard that completely cross-party here. So this is very much a cross-party thing. And I think that would be really positive, and also for Nick to take back to the teams as well and say, look, publicly, your hard work's been noted and noticed, and here it is in the minutes. They've actually put it in writing for the public.
Can you put it in the minutes? Can you also remind me to send an email, because I am bound to forget. Thank you.
So if we can add that, I mean, obviously, Eddie can go back through the recording and just quote my words verbatim. But that sentence would be great.
Right, so are we happy? Based on that, and I totally agree, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Thank you. Do we need to agree the recommendations of the previous paper that I suddenly realised we hadn't done? We'll just take note of anything that's discussed. Okay, fine. Thank you. You can have your laptop back. Thank you. Thank you. And for some reason, I can't actually open that supplement on this. For some reason. Okay, thank you. Right, so on the next item is, I think it's the work programme, isn't it? Yes, the work programme. Right, so let me just open that on here, page 154, rather than the printed copy.
Are you happy for me to just give a very...
Yes, if you could, while I find it, that'd be marvellous.
Just a very, very brief update on the work programme. You'll see there's a note there about the climate change strategy monitoring and about whether or not that would be considered in October. The climate change manager and the portfolio holder have basically agreed and accommodated that, so that will be coming in October now.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Yeah, November was looking quite busy, so I'm glad we were able to move that. Has anyone got any other suggestions? Yes, Councillor Lee.
I wanted to touch on the serious Councillor Deach incident where Heathborough Council obviously had to issue a correction to the public. Is that something that perhaps this committee should look at? Because those kind of statements of misinformation are really serious to both officers and to councillors, or whether it's better coming from external partnerships.
Okay, we don't think it's here. We think there might be a committee that it can come to, and we're gonna check it. I don't know if we need to check it right now, but if we can check the terms of reference for the relevant, we could probably, can we do that now?
The reason I raise it, either Councillor Deach is lying or the exec member for the county council is lying. One of the two is lying based on the public statement our council has issued. And that's really serious. That's really serious because that's misleading the public. And I think, we need to make sure that this incident is thoroughly investigated because it's bringing this council into disrepute and bringing the good name of our officers into disrepute. I think it's disgusting.
I'm happy to take that, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Just conversing with colleagues, clearly the person that you're referencing isn't a borough councillor, and as such perhaps it's not a matter for the borough council to consider. It's probably one for the county council to consider, and there are most certainly appropriate channels, as there would be for councillors within this chamber if it was felt that they were misleading the public and that needed to be corrected. I do acknowledge that I've seen the post. Clearly it does say that it was the Borough Council's decision to close Swift Lane as a CRC. That isn't correct. We've put out comms which are very clear and concise just to correct the record, and that quite honestly as a local authority and as officers would be as far as we would intend to go with that. It was very important that the public understood it wasn't the decision of the Borough Council, but I would suggest that perhaps that's one that gets posed to the County Council.
I have limited confidence in the County Council given previous situations, and it does directly involve and impact us, and I think it would be perhaps an idea to reflect and perhaps have a discussion between yourself and the leader to work out what you feel is reasonable. The definition of reasonable is what yourself and the leader define, but I think it's absolutely shameful that an elected Conservative politician should be lying and bringing the good name of officers and councillors
into disrepute. It's not a point for this particular committee, and we have got a full agenda tonight. I take on board your point, and the Chief Exec will take that away and discuss that with the leader, and we will follow the right channels, and hopefully we can come to some arrangement as to what we do with that. But I'm conscious that's not relevant for this particular agenda.
No, I'm quite happy to speak to the leader about that, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, for bringing that up.
And would you, Chair, like to distance yourself from those comments this evening?
What are we distancing myself
Are you
from?
not aware of the Paul Deach post?
What Paul Deach post?
Okay, if you're not aware, that's absolutely fine.
Maybe someone should share with me afterwards. I don't spend my life on Facebook, unfortunately, or fortunately for me. Right, okay, back to the work programme. Has anybody else got any other suggestions on the work programme? Are we happy with it stands right now? Okay, thank you. I'm conscious that if there's nothing else, we can go on to the next item. Can I just check with something before we go on to the next item? Just checking there was nothing on the next item was part 2, because that means we can keep it all in the public domain. Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking that. I'm conscious of the time, and I'm conscious there is actually no guillotine for this meeting. So I would suggest, and I'm going to be really stringent on this, can we have if we're happy to, have a 5-minute comfort break? 5 minutes, we'll make it just over 5, so it makes we can do that at 55. So 20:55, be back ready to go, guys. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, part two. No, it's not. Sorry, it isn't part two. It's the second part of the second part of the performance and finance. So the last item is item 9. Just to clarify a few points, there are no part two points within this paper, so we can just talk about everything. Secondly, because we're now entering the last item, there is no guillotine, so we can be here till the early hours of the morning if you really want to. Don't rub your hands, Councillor Wilson. Okay, so it'll be this. We've done this recently, so you should understand it. But basically, just to clarify, Councillor Ashby will get to talk for 8 minutes. Mr. Chinaya, I don't think is going to speak, but he got the right to speak as well. Councillor Wheeler is a contributor as well as being a committee member, so she gets to talk for 8 minutes. Then Councillor Tedder gets to talk for 8 minutes. Then Councillor Alloway gets to talk for 5. Then we'll go through them and speak to them all separately and ask questions from the committee. And then we get sum up from Councillor Ashbury, Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Tedder. And then we get to debate. So, that all being said, we're referring to call in for the Community Infrastructure Levy Review. Over to Councillor Ashbury.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I would just like to reiterate my concern raised at the last P&F meeting about how long it has taken for this calling to be heard. The executive decision was taken on the 18th of March, and my read of the Constitution is that call-ins should be heard at the next scrutiny committee, preferably within 28 days. To comply with this in the Constitution, it is my view that the 13th of May meeting was the right meeting for this calling to be heard, and it should not have taken 113 days from the executive decision to get to where we are today. I believe there were some issues raised about the process of calling last month at another call-in, and I'd like to call upon the Governance Working Group to add my concerns about the length of time this has taken to get to this committee, to their deliberations on that.
Point noted, because I did voice my concerns as well. Mr. Scott, I think you were we discussed it and you were going to say a little bit on it, yeah?
I know I've given Councillor Ashbury the long version. Did he want me to? No, okay.
I just wanted to reiterate that my reading of the Constitution is that 113 days from a decision to being heard by a scrutiny committee is not in compliance with that, and I think I would like the Governance Working Group to look at ensuring that never happens again.
I agree, basically, and there's various reasons for it, but in principle, I agree. Yeah.
I agree as well, and as we have the chair of the Governance Working Group here, I'm sure that will be taken note and will be added to the, because we need to nip that in the bud, because you're right, it shouldn't be 100 and however many days. Right, so we've got cross-party agreement on
everyone
that
agrees. Everyone agrees it shouldn't have taken this long.
Yeah. Okay, your 8 minutes hasn't started.
Okay.
So you can fire away.
Right. That said, my concern about how long it's taken, we are where we are. And so I'd like to, first of all, talk about how this paper came to the executive on the 18th of March. The paper was first discussed at the Homes Planning and Enforcement Working Group, of which Councillor Wheeler is a member, on the 17th of December 2024. No questions relating to potential unfairness to parish councils were raised at that meeting. The only questions raised were time limits for spending SIL money and the difference between SIL and Section 106 contributions, which Mr. Chinier clarified at that meeting and has been minuted and agreed in the minutes by all members of the committee since. Again, there was another opportunity for members to ask questions on the paper when it was presented to exec on the 18th of March. Councillor Noble asked a number of questions for clarification at that meeting, but no issues were raised by either of the councillors who have called this paper in. Having had 2 opportunities to raise concerns and not taking them, I was therefore surprised that they chose to call this decision in. One does have to wonder why we put so much effort into pre-scrutiny in working groups if members do not voice their concerns in those groups but choose to wait to call decisions in. Given that the call-in only refers to parish councils and not the rest of the paper that was agreed, I shall restrict my comments to parish councils because that is the scope of the call-in, and not the changes that were made in the paper to the rest of the borough. Under the current rules, parish councils receive 15% of the CIL collected in their parish, or 25% where there is an agreed neighbourhood plan. And aside from the regulations around what they can spend the money on, they're free to choose how to spend it on the projects they wish to bring forward. Currently, they can apply to the exec for funding of projects up to a maximum of a further 30% of the CIL monies collected in the parish over the past 3 years. 15% which goes automatically, plus a supplementary 30% which they can apply for funding to the executive only of the money collected in the last 3 years. So the CIL that's paid can be saved. The 30% that was agreed by the executive in 2023 by the previous administration limited the 30% to 3 years. So let's look at what this means for our parish councils today. Over the past 3 years, so municipal years 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, based upon the numbers given to me by the Section 151 officer, no money has been received relating to CIL for either Chobham or Bisley parish councils. West End Parish Council has received its 15%, totalling £6,703. Windlesham Parish Council has received its 15 or 25%, depending on where in the parish the development took place, totalling £205,414. Given these CIL receipts, under the current system, neither Chobham Parish Council nor Bisley Parish Council could apply to the exec for further funding. West End Parish Council could apply for funding to help with projects up to a maximum of £13,406, and Windlesham Parish Council could apply for funding up to £410,000. This is the status quo that Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Tedder have stated in the call-in that they wish to maintain. Under the proposal presented and agreed at the exec on the 18th of March, this process, capped at 30%, would be removed and replaced with a process with no cap, giving parish councils like Chobham and Bisley potentially the ability to access project funding which is not available to them under the current rules. I failed to see how a change from a process where parish councils apply to the executive for project funding which is capped at 30% of the last 3 years, to a change to a process where the parish council can apply to exactly the same decision-making body for funding which has no cap. I fail to see how that creates a disadvantage to the parish council. The purpose of looking at this in the first instance was to improve the process by how organisations could bring forward ideas to improve infrastructure that would benefit residents across the borough. I believe that the process proposed and agreed in March does this by removing artificial caps on what can be applied for. I do not believe that a process which would allow the 2 parish councils currently unable to apply for funding can be construed as disadvantageous. I just refer back to what the paper was trying to do in terms of parish councils, was to change the ability of being able to apply for 30% of CIL funding received in the last 3 years, with a process where, with the support of ward councillors, a bid could be made to the executive to fund projects where parish councils or other organisations had insufficient funds to do so themselves. So,
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Just to confirm, Mr. Chennai, you're here for obviously backup and questioning and all that sort of. Okay, fine. Thank you. With that in mind, then the next one on my list is Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. Homes Planning and Enforcement Working Group. I'm not familiar with that working group. I may have sat on it, but I don't remember ever sitting on a working group with that title. There we go. And in terms of not raising this at the executive, unfortunately, I'm not a member of the executive. I don't attend every executive meeting, and as some members are aware, recently I have a large number of family commitments, which means that I prioritise those meetings where I can have some meaningful impact, and therefore I wasn't in attendance at that particular meeting. In terms of the delay in the call-in, I agree with you. I think there was one call-in date that I was unable to make, and the rest of the meetings were very full. So I believe I was asked whether or not I minded, and I said I didn't mind. I didn't expect it to take quite this long. In terms of the comments that have been made both within the executive paper and this evening, it's unfortunate there is a mistake in my call-in. It shouldn't just have been limited to parish councils. It should have been all ward councils, but unfortunately it was done in haste. I understand it's at the discretion of the chair as to whether or not I can broaden out to ward councils. I'll go through what I was going to say anyway, and we consider it accordingly, and chair give you some time to consider. There is a very great risk that some wards within our borough that are impacted by development will have limited access to SIL funds. In 1.2 of this report, you will see that the paper submitted to the executive stated, since the change, there have been no successful bids that have been received. Although this is a true statement, it must be viewed in the same way that 8 out of 10 cats expressed a preference that said that they preferred a particular cat brand, because it is 8 out of 10 cats that expressed a preference. There is a bid, it was received a number of months ago, that meets the criteria, which is languishing in the long grass. With the approaching unitary authority and the lack of local representation that this change will bring, it is even more important that ward councillors who have the direct contact with our areas are able to confidently put forward proposals. The biggest difference in this is that there was a criteria, and if that criteria was met, then the proposal should be able to go ahead. What we're looking for here is a begging bowl to the executive, rather than having a formal process which we can all follow. There is a paper coming on the creation of parish and town councils at a future council meeting. I think it's just been announced, and the papers have been presented as in line with our strategic plan, which will review the potential creation of additional parishes and town councils. Is this really the time that we should be looking to introduce this change? Surely it is a time that all of us that truly represent our communities ensure that the decision is reversed and the status quo does remain until the end of this council, or until those additional bodies have been created. The reasons given for the recommendation to the executive in point 4.1 related to health infrastructure. This is not a responsibility of this council. And having sat on planning for a number of years, health infrastructure is not something that we have been held responsible for contributing to. Point 4.2 says that it would potentially risk strategic infrastructure projects coming forward and in turn future housing estates. Would potentially. Each application is considered according to a set criteria, and therefore strategic infrastructure projects are not something that we consider in a planning committee, and therefore it will not prevent us from dealing with housing coming forward. There is also the consideration of the LC WIP and the Camberley to Frimley cycle routes. This is incredibly slow coming forward, and with the new unitary authority, Quite frankly, at this stage, there is no guarantee that they will even continue. So to prevent solid local infrastructure that reflects a local need from coming forward is short-sighted. Our strategic infrastructure spending priorities are quoted as being SANGs, and this is legislated, it's not something we have a choice on, and it won't impact the amount of funds that are available for us to go to. Open space, I'd love to know where we are in the borough intending to add to our open space in order to support new development, because again, certainly all of the major developments that have come forward in the last 10 years have had either SANG provision provided, on-site SANGs, limited open green space, which is agreed and paid for directly with the developer. Sustainable local transport projects and pedestrian safety improvements. I applaud this, but I'm afraid I don't have a great deal of faith when I look at the success of that fantastic cycleway from Blackwater to the industrial parks. I'm yet to see anybody using them. Play areas and equipped playing space. We've just literally this evening heard that we are looking at partners to provide these, and that they are coming forward through a shared prosperity fund. This affects both Borough Road, Mitchett and Briars, and all of these will have been fully refurbished by 2025. Indoor sport and leisure facilities, again, we heard this evening that our only real indoor sports and leisure centres is the place on the London Road. They actually are helping us to fund other pitches, etc. Community facilities not directly related to a development. I'd love to have a list of those, because actually, again, we've had funding for all of those and they've all been discussed. Sustainable strategic transport projects is another thing that is mentioned that we would be spending this money on, such as climate change projects. Well, we've heard already quite a bit about those this evening, and they come forward as part of the development in terms of increased net biodiversity. Digital infrastructure. Okay, again, I'm sorry, I have no idea where these are being. I must have been sleeping through these meetings where we've been agreeing them. In point 6, it says that it is important to note that future SIL payments are dependent on the ability to bring forward new developments within the borough, and that SIL funding is an important role in enabling the infrastructure necessary to support new development being brought forward, and that the reduction in the allocation of SIL funding for strategic infrastructure is likely to constrain future development, which in turn, I'm sure you've read the papers. I've sat on planning for over 10 years. I've never heard this given as a reason for refusal or cited by a developer as a reason for not building. 4.7 says would work more effectively under the current system as there is a key way for bidding that isn't restricted. And 4.7 says that it would work more effectively. At the moment, we are looking at just being able to come to the executive twice a year. The current policy that is in place, we can come to the council with a costed, strategic, intelligent plan at any point. We have a majority council governed by councillors who stood on a local champion card. If you really want to represent your communities, you will support this going back to the executive to reconsider on the basis that the current structure improves local engagement, ensures an even and equitable division of funds. And I've got 4 more lines, very quick. Enable strategic local projects to come forward, does not disenfranchise or penalise wards that can't take development, should be delayed until after the decision on town/parish areas, and should not be changed between now and the new unitary authority.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tedder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2023, a motion came to full council to enable wards and parish councils to apply directly for SIL. This was universally supported cross-party. We're at a loss to understand why this has happened in the intervening period to justify this attitude being reversed. Liberal Democrats that supported this and are still with the council include Liz Noble, Morgan Rise, John Skipper and Sashi Malvaganam, a Lib Dem at the time, plus the 3 serving Conservatives and the 3 serving Independents. Parish areas received a subset of the SIL funds. Wards that are without a parish don't have a direct access option. Some wards, for example, West End, have taken a huge amount of development. The cumulative impact of this was not considered and therefore negotiations with the developed was not able to look at a cumulative impact. The knock-on of this development is felt in Lightwater, West End, Windlesham and Chobham. The ongoing development at Deep Cut, Mitchett, these also impact on West End and all the local villages. For example, the back road from Brookwood through Bisley, West End, goes through Chobham, and this is the quickest way to the M3 and the M25, and they suffer greatly. It is vastly unfair that wards and parish councils are prevented from submitting bids for central SIL funds. Given the imminent creation of the 2 or 3 unitary authorities, it is important that access to additional funding is not denied, and it seems an unnecessary change at this pivotal time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tedder. Councillor Alloway.
Good evening all, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on this. I will make reference to the paragraphs in the report to Executive dated 21st of February, which is page 161 of your papers. So, if I start, 1.2, paragraph 1.2, this is an inaccurate statement. Bids by West End Ward, as an example, have been submitted in collaboration with West End Parish Council, ward councillors and residents that were justified and supported applications to Borough to formally release funds for projects. The applications have been waiting for release of funds for at least 2 years. Paragraph 2.1. The P&F Committee is requested to recommend the Executive reconsiders its support for the report dated 21/2/25 with a view to upholding the 2023 SIL policy approved at full council unanimously in 2023. This will retain the opportunity of fairer distribution of SIL collected from wards accommodating significant development. Para 3.3. The NPPF introduced SIL to ensure that a community's infrastructure and quality of life was not negatively impacted due to significant development. SIL money levied from development in the ward should have been allocated to fundamental infrastructure that would support development, especially for significant increase in host location population. The infrastructure should have been implemented prior to development occupation, but that did not happen, which is why wards are in effect trying to catch up with post-development and post-delivery collection of SIL from house sales. Para 3.4. The motion passed in 2023 allows for 50% of collected SIL from a ward to be at the borough's disposal for projects elsewhere. Wards accepting significant development and population increase should be furnished with the needed infrastructure. It would be unfair to leave a ward with infrastructure deficit in favour of improvements miles away from the significant development site. Para 3.5. It is noted that SANG is needed to establish development mitigation measures. The 2023 policy makes provision for wards to utilise up to 45% of collected SIL to address infrastructure where development occurs. Wards that do not submit applications within 3 years of SIL allocation would concede the SIL allocation back to the general SIL fund. Para 4.1. Need should be addressed in the location accommodating significant development in priority to highway schemes remote from the development site. The previous SIL policy failed to provide any health infrastructure where significant development occurred, and is more the responsibility of central government and its medical facility building programme. The boroughs and districts will be abolished effectively in 9 months' time, with planning being taken into the new unitary control. 4.2. The previous mechanism has not worked to deliver reasonable infrastructure improvements where mass housing occurs. This is why the 2023 motion was proposed and agreed. The 2023 policy at least provides the opportunity to ensure residents are not left in infrastructure deficit or the ability to provide new facilities to support large population increases. Para 4.3. The LC WIP initiative is a long-term idea that faces significant hurdles. In fact, the scheme relies heavily on funding from the Department of Transport, which has to be bid for, so it's considered very unlikely it will be delivered. It would be unreasonable to expect the borough to raise all the money from development to finance, saying, major highways and hospitals. The developers simply not engage in unviable developments that would seriously inflate house prices. Para 4.4. The SIL funding policy should respect the intention of ensuring infrastructure is provided to meet the needs of location taking significant development. The 2023 policy meets that need. Para 4.5, SIL funding must in part support the development of the location accommodating it as the MPPF intended, as opposed to significant amounts being spent in remote locations. Para 4.7, it's fundamentally unfair to expect a ward to accommodate mass housing and be left wanting supporting infrastructure with the SIL money it has generated being spent in wards having accommodated no development and having no net increase in residents, therefore no real increased need for infrastructure. This is why the policy was changed to address this unfairness. Wards that have generated ward SIL money but has not submitted any projects for funding can be pulled for applications for improvements above the current needs of that ward. These would be improvements as opposed to addressing deficits in infrastructure due to mass development. 5.3.
Councillor Alloway, you're at your 5 minutes. Are you nearly finished?
I've just got a couple of lines.
Couple of lines, go on then.
Right.
Quick.
Yeah, 5.3. The proposal would be, this proposal should be refused as any ward that has not generated any SIL money or applies for funds above 30 or 45% of SIL receipts can apply to the General SIL Fund, where the executive should take a view as to contribute or not. The 2023 policy provides greater infrastructure delivery, opportunity for infrastructure delivery in the ward where significant development. And just one summing point, if I may. The important point is that any ward, not just parishes, as mentioned in page 159, taking significant development would lose its enhanced opportunity to secure infrastructure funds through a greater SIL money allocation. This would be the effect of reversing this 2023 SIL policy.
Well, I was just about to shut you down there. You literally finished just on time. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard from all the contributors. So we now go back round and question Councillor Ashbury. There is no time limit for this, but I want to try and keep some time so we don't go on forever. Yes?
Sorry, Chair, I just want a point of clarification. I kept my comments very strictly to parishes. There have been some very, very broad comments from the other contributors, which is not what was called in. I'm happy to discuss those. I'm just conscious that the process that was called in was only about parish councils, and there has been very little discussion about how the change impacts parish councils. And secondly, I would just like a point of clarification. There has been much talk from all three contributors, which is great, about the council motion in 2023. The council motion was not carried by the executive, of which you were a member, and the process was not that parish councils would get 45%, but they would maintain their 15%, and that any supplementary would have to be put to the executive. Now, we've had all three contributors say the process is not that, but that is the process. That was agreed by the exec, which is not what was passed in the motion by full council. So I just want to be clear that what has been talked about was a request from full council. It was rejected by executive in March 23. I just want to clarify that for those who were there.
I was happy to answer your question, but if you've got it down in writing, then I'll let you do that. The first question is first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So to be consistent with other call-ins that we've had, and this is on the advice of the monitoring officer in consultation with Democratic Services and myself, you'll recall the last call-in we had where we were very clear that the grounds for debate needed to reflect the call-in reasons. And in this particular instance, the call-in reason is that the decision disenfranchises parish councils. So that's what we need to stick to in terms of the question and the debate. The wording that was recounted last time, and I'll do it again, any discussion, debate or questions must therefore be restricted to the reasons set out above. This committee's role is to determine whether the reason given for calling in the decision is warranted. We aren't here, or rather you are not here, to raise or debate any other points relating to either the executive meeting where the SIL policy was considered, SIL in general, or other matters. I hope that clarifies. Just to come to the outcome of the debate, this committee can essentially agree with the decision, in which case the decision will be implemented immediately, agree with the decision but add informatives to submit to the decision maker, and that would be the executive in this instance, or refer the decision back to the decision maker for reconsideration, setting out in writing the nature of any concerns. After reconsideration, the decision maker will either implement the original decision or amend it as appropriate. I hope that helps.
And just to clarify as well, you're right, but at the last meeting, I think we had the speeches were speeches and they covered lots of areas. We are now in the question and debate, and the question and debate, as you quite rightly say, and as highlighted there, can only relate to the call-in as it stands, and I cannot change the description for the call-in. I've checked with the Democratic Services on that one as well. So it relates to the disenfranchising of parished areas. Okay, right, with all that in mind,
Just a point of clarification, there was a statement made about a document that's been relied on that wasn't accepted by the previous Conservative executive. Can we have absolute clarity on where that stands, just for my little brain? Councillor Ashby may wish to re-remind people of his statement.
yeah, can you just re-clarify just that part?
Yeah, so looking back through the papers and watching the YouTube videos, a motion came from full council to request the executive to amend the SIL allocation to 45% of SIL collected in a parish area to be paid to the parish council. The executive rejected that and passed the fact that 15% stroke 25% would be paid to the parish council, and that the balance of the 30% collected over the previous 3 years to fund projects could be brought forward to the executive as a request, and the executive would consider that on its merits and against the Regulation 123 list, which Councillor Wheeler kindly read out to us earlier on. So that was what was passed, that was the executive decision, not the council motion requesting something different.
Chair, can we just have clarification from officers as to whether that statement is correct? If we need to take 10 minutes to just review things, I think it's really important because it's
not going to stop for 10 minutes.
Well,
Mr. Scott is looking at that as we speak. Okay, so we can go into the questions as they stand, and if we relate back to that point that you're referring to, then we'll hopefully have an answer in the next however minutes it's going to take.
The difficulty we've got is we don't know which piece of council decision we're talking about. So you're asking us to have a hypothetical discussion about one of two different possible positions. As chair, I think we do need to understand what we're going to be scrutinising. We can't go into hypotheticals because we might be scrutinising something we're not allowed to ask questions on because we don't know.
Yeah. So we're referring to this decision, really. Yeah. We are still looking, but just to clarify, we are only discussing the call-in, okay, and that is debating purely disenfranchising parish councils, okay, not the decision that was made by the executive and the full council back
But
in
the
2023.
decisions made that may or may not have been made at executive may or may not impact what parishes can
We're
and can't
discussing
have.
the call-in of the executive paper that came to the meeting in whenever it was, March?
But we don't understand the status quo. So until we understand the status quo, how can we have a debate about what's changed? Because parishes could be entitled to something they're not, or they could not be entitled to something they are. We don't know. Until we know, this is descending into a little bit of chaos.
Okay, fair enough. We'll pause it for a second while the officers are looking.
That the current SIL policy be amended as set out in section 5 of the agenda report.
But
They put forward proposals to the executive for local infrastructure up to the indicative maximum value of 45% of the silver seats generated in their area. So it has to come forward to executive, but it is understood that they can do that.
Should I come in? So I haven't had time to read the whole minute here, but just from what Councillor Wheeler just said, yes, that is what full council recommended to executive for consideration, but I haven't yet had a look, but that isn't necessarily what executive agreed.
Exactly. So we need to understand what executive agreed.
That is what executive agreed. That is what executive agreed. The request that came from full council was that the 45% be allocated, not at the executive's discretion. So it was modified at executive. I wasn't at the meeting. I think you probably were. Your name's on the minutes, but no. But that's the thing. There is a difference. When I've been researching this, there is a difference between the motion that came from full council to what was agreed by the executive, and I think that's where part of the confusion has come from.
Is what I said. I'm glad I'm right. And we're right. So basically, I'm going back to what I just discussed with the officers, and the monitoring officer is online. Basically, we are referring to a call-in that was based on the executive paper that came in 18th of March, yes. And that is what we are debating, and that is the questions we are going to be asking on. Okay? Okay. If we go off, as I'm quite sure we might someone might do, please kick me, and we'll make sure we go back on. Okay? Right. I think we're still with you, Councillor Ashbury, aren't we? We haven't started, but we're going.
Yeah. Questions to Councillor
Yes.
Ashbury.
Gone? Yeah, exactly. You're up for questions. Okay, right. Anyone got any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, it's going on from this point about there possibly being a misunderstanding among the other three speakers. So you're going from a status quo of where the parish would get a base of 15% and they could apply to the executive for up to 45% of the SIL generated in their own area, to an agreement or a decision made by the executive in March that they would get the 15% or 25%, 15% base amount, and the cap would be lifted. They could apply for any amount of SIL in their own area or outside it if the projects meet the criteria. Is that correct?
That is broadly correct, that any project that meets the Regulation 123 criteria, which is what has been consulted on with the public and agreed by the previous administration as to what SIL funds could be spent on, provided it met that and it met the needs of the borough that the exec would make. It's the same decision-making body that would make that decision. Then there would be no cap on it, unlike at the moment.
Yeah, so that sounds to me that it doesn't disenfranchise parishes, it does the opposite. It gives them more freedom and potentially a lot more money, even if they've got no SIL money coming in. So I'm worried about Chobham Parish Council because they're not getting any SIL money coming in, as you said. So they need money. They need money to spend on expensive projects like their all-weather playing surface and the repairs to the church wall. So isn't it really disadvantageous for Chobham Parish Council to stick with the status quo?
As I said in my introduction, as there have been no SIL receipts in Chobham Parish over the last 3 years, they cannot apply for extra funding. So in essence, in terms of the main SIL fund, if Chobham Parish Council has nothing left in its SIL reserve, they currently would be unable to apply for extra funding.
So as someone who's got close links to Chobham, I think the status quo is bad for them, and this call-in would be bad for them. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Goodness me, there's more slant there than italics. So the second part of the council decision does say the council enters into a formal consultation on a revised regulation 123 statement. Obviously that never happened, which gives weight to the allocation of the main SIL funding for infrastructure in those parishes and wards where recent development has taken place alongside other stated borough-wide infrastructure requirements. Now, to say that Chobham Parish Council needs money for a church wall is quite frankly ridiculous, because that isn't an infrastructure requirement. They need money for a parish wall, there's a church wall, there's no doubt about that, but that is not an infrastructure arrangement. Conversely, another parish council where you have a great deal of involvement is Windlesham Parish Council, which
Wheeler,
okay,
questions. We're not debating right now, so can we have a question?
Okay, so my question is, no, I haven't got a question actually, but then I don't think that was a question. I just have a disagreement that I don't think it disenfranchises.
We can have that in the debate when we get to debate, that's fine. Has anyone, yes, Councillor Cope.
So I've got a couple. The first is, I suppose, thinking about where a parish council might be disenfranchised, I suppose, is where it has a large number of SIL receipts. Under the changes, it is effectively losing some control over those because they're no longer ring fenced for that parish council. So, say for example, Chobham had £100,000 contributed to SIL. Under the current system, in total, £45,000 would effectively be ring fenced for Chobham, under my understanding. Under this, it would only be £20,000. I'm clearly misunderstanding, so correct me, Councillor Ashbury.
Yeah, sorry. There is no ring fencing. The 15% stroke 25% where there's a neighbourhood plan is paid directly to the parish council. That is paid to the parish council. That is the parish council's money. No one can do anything with that beyond the parish council. The parish council could then apply for up to another 30% of their receipts in the last 3 years. That is at the gift and the discretion of the executive. It is not ring-fenced money, that is for that. It is from the main SIL fund, which is controlled. So there is no ring-fencing beyond the 15 or 25%, which is paid automatically.
So just so I'm clear, if the SIL fund is depleted and they make that application, there's no money there, tough luck is basically the status quo and the position going forwards.
That is the status quo in parished areas and non-parished areas. If there is no SIL money because it has already been spent, there is no SIL money. It's that straightforward.
Councillor Whelan.
Yeah, there is a reserve SILs, there is a central pot. So if there is a large development that requires that money to be spent in that parished area, then that money would be favoured. And it says very, very clearly in the decision.
Can we have a question?
Yes. The question is, okay, Is it not possible for parish areas to apply for the central funding that remains or any unspent monies, even if they haven't had any development?
Under the proposal, if we change to the proposal agreed by executive on the 18th of March, that is exactly what we are trying to implement.
Sorry, that's how it is at the moment. They can apply for the funds that are left over currently. They don't have to have SIL. They can apply for the money that is there centrally at the moment. That stands.
Under the proposal to fund the projects under the agreement in 2023, that would be capped at the 30%. Everything else would be at the discretion of the executive. So it comes to the same decision-making body anyway. All we're trying to do is take away the artificial cap that currently would prevent an application for a larger amount of money to be spent.
Councillor Cope.
So I'm going to, again, probably show my lack of knowledge on this subject. So what you're currently saying is that if Chobham Parish Council made an application, I'm using Chobham as an example, and it exceeded that 45% total, they couldn't do that at the moment. That's a cap on what they can bid for.
At the moment, with no SIL money received in the last 3 years, they could not apply for the 30% that was agreed that they could apply for in the 23 paper.
May I just come back on this? We're getting very confused. You've got 30%, which you can apply for, which is a central SIL pot. If you take development, within the paper, it says very, very clearly that the current...
Councillor Wheeler, okay. When we come to debate, I'm happy to take it, but I'm still in question mode right now. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, a completely different question. It's probably for Councillor Ashbury, but it might be for the Head of Planning. And it's about another misunderstanding that we've just heard, that planning is going to move to the Unitary Authority in 9 months. That's the first I've heard of that. Can we have an expert tell us if that's a misunderstanding?
Whichever one are you allowed to?
Good question, yes.
Let's ask one of the two gentlemen over there.
It is. So there's a couple of points on there. If the unitary authorities go ahead, which is still not guaranteed, my understanding of the process is there will be elections to the shadow authority in May 2026. The actual unitary authority will not exist until May 2027. So any transfer of any responsibility from this council, which includes planning, would not happen until May 2027, not in May 2026, as been stated.
Thank you, that's clear.
Unless I'll let the Chief Executive correct me if I'm wrong.
was going to say, I think. Yes, go on, just for clarification point.
Yeah, indeed, you are right. The calculations are roughly 20 months. The vesting day would be April 2027.
Okay, any more?
Thank you. No, just to say that's one of, it seems like a number of misunderstandings. Thank you.
Councillor Cope.
Thanks. Just on sort of, I just want to get a little bit into sort of the logic behind the decision. So it feels to me that the key driver for the executive making this decision was in some ways to allow the executive to have greater discretion to spend funds across for the benefit of the whole borough rather than specific to the wards where the SIL is necessarily generated. Is that a fair assessment?
I think a fair assessment was to deliver infrastructure where it is needed in the borough with the SIL reserve that has been collected, which has not been being spent for a number of reasons over recent years.
Yes, Councillor.
Would it be fair to say that when this decision was made, it was viewed as a fairly minor change? Or did you anticipate a great amount of pushback from parish councils?
As I felt this was advantageous to parish councils, and even though we're not discussing the non-parished areas of the borough, I didn't really expect to have this level of confusion and discussion around it.
Right, unless anyone has got a burning question, I'm going to move on to the next contributor. Okay, marvellous. So, I know you didn't speak, but has anyone got any questions for Head of Planning? No? Okay, you got off lightly. Okay, so that takes us to Councillor Wheeler. So this is questions of Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Lee.
I'm not sure if I was beaten by Councillor Cope there. Councillor Wheeler, could you just remind me of the particular exec meeting? I just wanted to have a quick look at the papers here. I know you were kind enough to show them to you. If you just remind me the date and time. I just want to have a quick flick through, and while other people are asking questions, I may have other questions, but I'd be terribly grateful, so thank you.
I'm looking at the minutes of the executive of the 14th of March 2023, which are on the April 2023 executive papers. And there it says, oh God, I've just lost it.
Honestly, if it's 14th of March 2023, I'll go and look them up now. So,
yeah, they're there.
And I'll sit here quietly.
They are in the April thing.
Brilliant.
Where it clearly says that following discussion, it was agreed to adopt a revised SIL policy as set out at section 5 of the agenda report, and that we would provide for parishes and wards to have the scope to put forward proposals to the executive for a local infrastructure up to a maximum indicative value of 45% of the SIL receipts generated for their area. This is designed for those areas to have the support that they need where they have taken development. And in the nicest possible way, Chobham will be taking loads of development. They will have more SIL funds. They will be able to apply for that infrastructure in a much more streamlined way when those developments come forward.
I'm going to give you that one, but it wasn't actually a question relevant to the cooling.
I was answering the question that
his
Councillor
question
Lee
wasn't.
asked me.
I know. Right, Councillor Cope.
Thanks. So obviously the claim is that parish councils are being disenfranchised. And I came to the meeting fairly sympathetic, but my mind is slightly changing because I'm still struggling to see. Can you give me an example where a parish council would want to apply for X amount of money and under this new scheme would have a lesser opportunity to do so than they would under the old scheme?
I'll defer that response actually to the councillor that has been trying to get funds approved for the last however many months.
Can I suggest, so we don't go,
yeah.
Can you ask that question of Councillor Alloway when we get to Councillor Alloway? Marvellous.
Thank you.
You can prepare an answer. Okay, any more questions of Councillor Wheeler? No, okay. So that takes us on to Councillor Tedder. Any questions of Councillor Tedder? Okay, no questions. Councillor Cope, would you like to ask a question of Councillor Alloway?
Thank you. Councillor Alloway, can you give me a worked example, or which may be a real life one that you're experiencing, where a parish council is disadvantaged under the new system in comparison to the old system?
Yeah, there's a confusion between old and new system. The reason the 2023 policy was put forward was to address the shortcomings of the previous policy because we weren't getting infrastructure that was needed in an example of a West End. So to recap on West End in 2015 to 2019, it took 400 houses, 1,000 new residents. We have had 15% SIL money, but we've consulted the residents and provided the Muga, skate park and some other small projects. We have some money left, but the existing pavilions is built in 1976. It's well out of date for heating, environmental, all those good things. plus the new residents are disadvantaged, especially going to school, because the residents have got to cross a busy road to get their kids to infant school. Now, that should have been addressed when the planning went forward, but it wasn't. It didn't need to be, because it was all classed as a not collected development, so the developers got away with that. But the seal money could be used for that, because the parish haven't got a problem with negotiating with highways to get that done, to make it a safe crossing for parents to walk their kids to school. But all of these things are costing more than what we've got in allocated 15% seal money. So that's a reason why we changed that policy to allow up to 45% of the generated seal from that ward, which in our ward should be in a region of 3 million. So in effect, we'd be asking for an extra 400,000, which would completely provide the local pavilion facility for the residents completely, and allow us as a parish council to make the highways changes. Those very needed infrastructure requirements could be funded, and they're properly meeting the seal requirements for spending. So that's the reason why the seal policy in 2023 was changed, because up to then it didn't work. We weren't getting infrastructure, and clearly we were asking for it, and there wasn't an ability to deliver it for us.
Can I just ask, I don't know that answered your question.
Yeah, disadvantages, because if you go back to the old system, 15% is it, and then if anyone wants to apply for more, they've got to go to the executive and hope.
Excuse me, Chair, a point of order. Yeah, we're not discussing the pre-2023 system. We're discussing the difference between the status quo and the 2025 system.
Which is what I was, yeah. So your question was, how are they disadvantaged now versus the way it stood before the executive change, yes?
I guess my question is, as I understand it, obviously you could make that application under what I'm calling the old system, what might be called the current or previous system. Current system, yeah. Under the altered system, as I understand it, you could still make that application. And I don't want to sort of get into I don't want to litigate a seal application this meeting. But I guess, is your proposition that you have less chance of securing those funds from the executive as a result of this change? And if so, why?
That's correct, because the, dare I say, their 2023 policy, no. Well, okay, previously it was 45% allocation that we could apply to. If you go back to, if you go back to what it was, then it's 15%, and you have to compete against a cycleway down the A331 funding. Whereas really the intention was, with opportunity to access a greater seal funding, the development that needs the infrastructure that needed with that development could be reliably or more reliably achieved.
So the proposition is that you are disenfranchised because you are bidding in a more competitive market against potentially other bidders for funds that can be used across the borough, rather than having this ability to increase up to the 45%. That's your proposition, is that correct?
That's the interpretation, yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, the £400,000 project, did West End Parish Council put in an application to the Borough Council for it?
Applications are in, a number of projects were put forward, I think in March or April 2023, still waiting for allocation
So
of the funds.
put in these applications under the 2023 system, the status quo, and they haven't been successful.
It's not successful, it's the fact that they haven't been determined.
So the current status quo is not working for you? So you put in these applications and they haven't been successful. So the current status quo is not working for you?
It's not a case that it's successful, we're waiting for that to be determined.
Right, and you think the new system, well, sorry, I won't bother asking the question. You've answered Councillor Cope's question. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wheeler.
So my understanding is that the current applications should be determined under the old system, given that they were received during the period that was standard. I've just seen that the Chief Executive has said no, that's not the case, which means that essentially the Parish Council, having done all of this work, will go back to square one. So is that right? It won't be determined under the old system. So what we've been doing is kicking in the long grass long enough to hope that we don't have to determine it.
I'm going to let the Chief Exec because it's a point of clarity.
I'm apprehensive to respond because clearly the point of debate is about whether or not the policy that was put forward this year disenfranchises parish councils, and we're going beyond that realm of debate. Just to provide some clarity though, and I think it is important, what Councillor Allaway is referring to is a previous request in relation to highways infrastructure contributions. There were very long, protracted conversations between the Parish Council, the Borough Council and the County Council about the merits of contributions to a highways infrastructure project where there were concerns about the upper quartile speed of vehicles travelling down Belden Bridge Road predominantly. The fundamental challenge is we are not the Highways Authority, and therefore is it prudent for the Borough Council to fund a highways infrastructure project where the County Council will not? It was not on the County Council's prioritisation list, and therefore ultimately through very long protracted conversations, and I will hold my hands up that clearly some of that was down to my capacity, Councillor Allaway, they have not come to fruition for that reason. Since then, we have had conversations about contributions to other parish projects, and they will come forward to an executive paper. The critical question that Councillor Wheeler has asked, and I'm happy to answer, is under which policy will that paper come forward? Clearly, if the decision comes to executive post this call-in, depending on the outcome of this particular call-in debate, they will be considered under the policy that is in play at that time. That is my view. I'm happy to take legal advice on it, but that is my current perception.
Just as two points of order, Chair. The first one, obviously, we're talking about the County Council in this now, which I don't think is relevant to this call-in. So I'm very grateful for the Chief Exec for explaining some of the background, but I think, Councillor Allaway, I think you're being a little bit naughty moving into County Council business when this is quite clearly Borough Council business. And the second one, Chair, is you ran the meeting previously on a call-in with an iron fist, and I got away with nothing. I'm quite shocked this evening at the chairing with the amount that other people are getting away with. I think we need to stay focused on the call-in and the exact issues. Otherwise, we're going to be here till midnight. I've just said to Councillor Wilson, my bet is we finish about 11:30.
I'm going to let you speak because I'm
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Lee, that's probably my fault.
No, it's not your fault. It was opened up by Councillor Allaway, who knew more than was known by the rest of the committee. You gave us reassurance it's not relevant. I was looking to Councillor Allaway to not open us up to naughty issues again.
Exactly that, and I appreciate the comment. I wanted to provide clarity because it was important, because I didn't want this committee to be misled.
And I'm still trying to run it with an iron fist. And I allowed the Chief Exec to speak because I'd already said to him he couldn't speak.
I'm in full support of the Chief Exec speaking. My issue was Councillor Allaway being naughty and opening it up when he knew that it was outside the remit of what we're discussing.
But unfortunately I didn't, so okay. Right, so we don't want to go on more debate about that. So any Any more questions of Councillor Allaway? Councillor Kang.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I'm trying to understand how West End are disadvantaged under the new system. I still don't get it. If you could put it in plain English as to why this new will be detrimental or disenfranchise West End or anywhere where the parish council.
So it's a difference between 15% and the opportunity to secure up to 45%. With the allocated system, would allocate 45% of ward-generated seal to that ward. So they would get a preferential opportunity to apply for that funding, as opposed to the straight 15%, and then we're competing against, you know, whatever anybody else thinks is a good project. Could be in, you know, the edge of the borough, 10 miles away.
Just to follow up, my understanding is that this new doesn't prevent that. It still allows you to apply to the borough council if it's borough and it's not to do with the county. That's my understanding.
Yeah, we can still apply, but as I say, we're competing with all other areas of the borough. Some of those wards may not have taken development, but with the 45% allocation that can be applied for, provided it meets the justified
So in
rules.
my understanding might be cruel. So you want the bigger bite of the apple before others can get to it.
Having taken 1,000 new residents, in some cases, in our case, yes, as opposed to someone that's taken 0. It's fair.
Are neighbouring wards impacted by these developments?
Sorry?
Are neighbouring wards impacted by these developments, yes or no? Yes. Thank you.
Didn't actually answer.
Well, we've heard earlier, so it was a rhetorical question. Neighbouring wards are impacted by these developments, and that is an argument that's been made earlier. So it was a rhetorical question.
Okay, Councillor Glower, I'm going to allow you to be the last person, unless anyone's got a burning, because I had no other hands that are burning result required. I have to ask questions. Over to you.
Yeah. Am I right in thinking that you could get more than your 45% with this new system? So therefore, it could be to your advantage, because rather than getting just your 45, you could get 60%. So you can get more this way.
Yes, but the likelihood is not, because up to now it hasn't provided that. And we could apply for 90%, but it ain't going to happen. That's why the changes were made to give a more sure opportunity of a greater allocation of the seal provided by the board.
You get surety, but you could, a bit like a lottery, you might actually get more in the new system.
Well, yeah, but you have to put it into reality, don't you? It hasn't happened. That's why the policy was made.
Sorry, is it a question?
Give me a second to think about that, and I'll put it.
No, because we're at 10:05, and we haven't even got to debate yet, and we've got summing up to do. Right. So on that note, we've got Councillor Asprey, then Councillor Wheeler, and then Councillor Tedder to sum up. There is no time limit, but I'm going to put one. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. No, no, Chair, I'm going to time it. I'm going to time it. I'm going to give you a reasonable amount of time.
Chair?
Yes.
Chair, just as a point of order, I assume the summing up will focus specifically on the call-in now. We're not going to wander off into other topics, because we can easily wander off into other topics and burn till 11:30, which is where I think it's going to land.
We need to stick to the call-in, 3 words, disenfranchising, I've written it down, parish councils, parish areas, in fact. So, Councillor Ashbury.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on a couple of the points that were made in there. So, I've already said on the point of clarification, it has been implied that the 45% was guaranteed. It is not guaranteed. It is always at the exec's discretion. I just want to make that clear. That has always been the case. Councillor Wheeler doesn't remember a working group, but according to the minutes, she was in attendance. Homes planning and enforcement was what the local plan working group morphed into and has become now built environment and regulation. So the proposal, it was said this prevents local infrastructure. In fact, it's not designed to prevent local infrastructure. It is designed to encourage it and strengthen it. Councillor Wheeler queried the Regulation 123 list, which is agreed through consultation with the public. So we may need to go back and revisit that because the implication was that was out of date, but that has nothing to do with the calling in terms of parish council. I personally, in this chamber, am becoming more and more frustrated with my colleagues implying that we should do nothing for the next 2 years and hope LGR fixes everything. I don't believe that is a responsible attitude for us as elected representatives to have. I believe we should continue to try to discharge our responsibilities. So every one of the other speakers mentioned local government reorganisation. I do not believe that is a factor in this at all, and I don't believe it should form part of any discussions. The last point I want to bring up, Councillor Allaway quite rightly pointed to significant development between 2015 and 2019. I don't recognise the number of £3 to £4 million in SIL, because if that were the case, we'd have significantly more than the current reserve that we have. But I agree with the principle. However, I will go back to the decision of March 2023, which was the decision we looked to change with this decision. West End Parish Council, under that system, could currently only apply for £13,406 because it was time-bound to 3 years. That is the status quo that you wish to defend. I believe it's fairer to all parish councils and to the wider borough to enable any organisation to bring forward proposals for infrastructure that will benefit the borough of Surrey Heath. Thank you.
Very succinct, thank you very much. Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to read, because I think there's been a lot of confusion about whether or not there is a presumption in favour of that 45% being allocated. I'm going to stick to parishes where the development has taken place. The fact that West End Parish Council is out of time is not the fault of West End Parish Council. It's the fault that in 2 years we've not, as a borough, managed to make a decision. Point 2 from the agenda minutes for that executive meeting says, which gives weight to the allocation of the main SIL funding for infrastructure in those parishes and wards where recent development has taken place, alongside the other stated borough-wide infrastructure requirements. Okay, so it gives weight, and that is the bit that we are missing here. And for those of you, as I said, that are aware of where we've spent a huge amount of SIL money, that fabulous cycleway, I don't feel that the parishes that have taken the development have benefited from where we've spent the additional SIL money. And anything that gives weight to those parishes should be considered as a distinct advantage. And that's really the main point that we're considering here. We can say that they could apply for more. They could have applied for more out of that 30% remaining fund bit, but actually that is to the point of Council Lee, whereby other boroughs, other wards or parishes may be affected by local development. That's where that 30% extra goes, because it's right, they should be able to apply if they've been impacted by neighbouring boroughs, neighbouring parishes' development. So it's that weight in favour of, the presumption in favour of, which is really important here.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Tedder.
I don't think there's anything I can really add, Mr. Chairman, so I shan't waste the council's time.
Thank you. Just wanted to check. Okay, so that's all the contributors have all spoken, have all summed up. Just bear with me just a second. So we're now...
I've got a point of clarification.
Of course you have.
So Councillor Wheeler read out a piece of text. Could we just have clarification from where that text was read out? So the minutes or agenda item and the paragraph, please.
Is that from the executive?
Paragraph 2, you've got it in front of you. You've got it open.
Well, I've got paragraph 5.6.
Okay, I'm looking at paragraph 2 of that minute, and it's the minutes of the executive 14th of March 2023, as reported in the April papers.
So the council enters into formal consultation on a revised regulation 123 statement, which gives weight to the allocation. So it's referring to the 123 statement.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we don't need to hear anything else from you guys. I'm sure you want to hang around. Okay, so we are now in the debate. So it's a free-for-all. Bearing in mind that what we need to do at the end of this is, and I'm just, where the hell did I find the page? We need to, I've lost the page. Bear with me just 1 second. We need to make a decision. What page was it on, Eddie? Thank you very much. No. So I'm just trying to find the relevant page so we know exactly what we're... And I found it just before we started the meeting, but then obviously I've scrolled through since. It's a very big... It's a very big... 155. I just got there as well. Okay, cool. Right, so the point we need to... The point of the debate is at some point we need to make a decision, and it's on 155.2 1.1. There are 6 different outcomes that we need to make a decision on. So just we need to centre ourselves on that and realise that's where we ultimately need to go. Right, okay, that all being said, Councillor Wheeler's got her hand up first.
I have. I will just say that in the papers, the executive, and I'm quoting, the recommendation is that the executive is advised to resolve the removal, point 2, of the 45% allocation to parish councils and revert back to the 15 open brackets, 25% closed brackets. So I understand why there's a great deal of confusion over this.
Okay. That was a minutes from the meeting on. Okay. Right. Thank you. I'm not, hang on, let me make a note of this, 155, 161. Okay, so, questions, debate. Who's going to go first? No one. Okay, do we want to... Sorry, Councillor Cope.
Go on then. So, I mean, I've sort of just been trying to think this through in my mind as to, is there a disenfranchisement because you're effectively losing, you have a lower allocation of SIL fundings, but from what we've heard tonight, it doesn't seem that that allocation has a great deal of weight because you're able to bid for other sums anyway. So the second question then is, are you disenfranchised because you're bidding against other parties? I guess to an extent you are, because there's a finite amount of SIL resources. But my experience over the last 2 years is I'm not aware of this council being inundated with SIL applications. So I think it's probably one of those rare things where we can say that the pot is reasonably healthy. So to me, it feels like any disenfranchisement is negligible. Appreciate that that's not going to be a popular comment from some of my friends over there, but that's just sort of where I am in my mind, but interested to hear what other members of the committee think.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I wonder if it's worth just having clarification on, in terms of the SIL funds that are currently available, which SIL funds have not been, the percentage that is available after the provision for SANGs is the bit that I will go with, where they are currently allocated to projects, or there are projects in mind for them, what is remaining and where are those projects?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt there? I think that question moves us out of the realms of what we should be discussing and debating for the call-in. It's restricted to the reasons for the call-in, so I think that goes outside.
If I can just explain my reasoning behind it, Councillor Cope has just raised the fact that parishes wouldn't be disenfranchised because there is an enormous pot for us all to ask for bids from. And therefore, we wouldn't be disenfranchised because there's so much money washing about that it doesn't matter that there's not the 45% allocated to the parishes where development has taken place. That was the reason for my question, to understand whether or not there is a big swishy pot.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think it does still take us outside the remit. I think we should try and narrow the scope to just the reasons for the call-in. That's my advice.
Maybe I could rephrase it then and say what allocation of SIL funds is currently allocated to parished areas that have taken development.
Can you just bear with me just one? Right, we're just checking I can still ask you, Gavin, because you're the only person I can ask.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of that figure, I won't be able to give that figure tonight. I want to take it away and have a look at that, because obviously the SIL funding fluctuates because we obviously get income which comes in, and that fluctuates over time. So I'll take that away and come back to you on that.
Sorry, could I ask a supplement, Christian? And can I just say what projects within parished areas that have taken development are we aware of that are utilising SIL funds?
Again, we'll have to come back to you on that one, and I don't have that to hand.
Okay. Councillor Claret.
I was just going to say that I do agree with Councillor Cope and thought he summarised my feelings very well. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hoff and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually also going to say I agree with Councillor Cope, which isn't, I don't think I've said before. So, yeah, as in terms of the funding as I see it, I think parish councils could still apply for the up to 45%. The current rules, as I see it, are restricting them to apply for that 45%. The proposal is they could put a request in for money above that. I'm not sure where the idea that this 45% is ring-fenced just for that parish council. I don't know if anyone can confirm that, but as I understood it, they had the opportunity to bid up to 45% out of that main pot. So it was a cap as opposed to an allocation. I don't know if that was my interpretation, but yeah, the way I see it, I think that could potentially be beneficial and across parish councils and the wider borough.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Huff and Councillor Glort as well.
Does that mean you agree with Councillor Cope as well?
It's not what I said. But I'm worried about Chobham Parish Council. That doesn't have any sale money, has great demands, and the current status quo disenfranchises them. So that's why I think the executive decision is beneficial for Chobham Parish Council and the other parishes. So That's where I'm coming to from that, because the status quo disenfranchises Chobham. We don't want that.
Councillor Whelan.
Can I come back on what it says, okay, in terms of it is resolved that the current cell allocations to parishes and wards be maintained at blah. The 45% allocation to parish councils be removed. That is the statement that is in the papers. That is the statement on which we pulled in this application. It says the 45% allocation to the parish councils be removed and the 15% in brackets 25% allocation be introduced. Can I also clarify there is nothing to stop the parish councils for applying for additional funds out of the remaining still amounts should they need to. But what this says is that they are removing that 45% allocation. That's what the statement is. That is why we called it in. So as I've said all the way along this evening, I am not surprised that we're confused. I'm confused because the statement in the paper says 45% allocation be removed. The parish councils can apply over and above that.
Bear with me, Councillor Lee, just 1 second. Sorry, Councillor Lee.
I think I'm losing the will to live. It's removing the cap, right? It's a good thing.
No, it's
you
not
know,
removing the cap.
it's a positive thing. I'm not quite sure what else I can say without wandering into talking about lots of off-topic things that have gone on this evening. You know, we're now at nearly 10:30. I jokingly said 11:30, thinking 10:30, and everyone would say, yeah, over an hour early, and it looks like 10:30 is actually the reality.
Thank you for your input. Councillor Kang.
This council is thank you, Chair. This council is acting for the benefits of all residents. And if a parish council or any other parish council wishes to have some funds, there is no barrier for them applying and going beyond that 45%. So this is not in a way disenfranchising, this is in a way opening up.
Okay, so based on the feeling of the room, not everybody's going to agree, and I get that we're not all going to agree on this at any point, so I totally understand that. We need to go back to this decision based on 155. Now, look, crikey, my eyes are starting to blur. I think we're looking, and I don't want to guide specifically, but looking at the options we've got before us, we've either got little I agree with the decision which has been called in which case it will be implemented with immediate effect, or point 2, which is what we ended up doing with the last call-in, agree with the decision but add an informative to submit the decision. Now, I'm happy to accept other suggestions. Has anyone got any suggestions? And if we are looking at just those two options, is there an informative that we would like to suggest for little 2? Councillor Wheeler.
I would like an informative to be suggested that when papers come out, they are clear and not misleading, because the thing that was resolved is that the 45% allocation to parish councils be removed. The implication behind that statement is that there was an automatic 45% allocation to parish councils. So I think we need to be very clear moving forward on our minutes.
yeah, I agree. We can certainly take that away as a point, but I don't know we can put that as an informative on this particular call-in. Crikey, I can't see you now. I apologise, take my glasses off. I agree with the Chief Exec. We can certainly take that back, but I don't think we can put that as an informative on this, this item. So, has anyone got any other suggestions, a specific? Councillor Cope, you were looking like you were going to say something. Were you going to say something, or...?
Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of building on Councillor Wheeler's point. I do feel point II of the executive decision is quite hard to follow. And I think it has, I don't think it's worded in the best way. I was trying to think of some words that I thought were more appropriate, but I have thus far failed. But I wonder whether just some consideration could be given to the way that's described as the 45% allocation to parish councils be removed, because I accept that that does sound like we're taking something away, but based on the debate tonight, it doesn't really seem like that is the case. So I guess maybe rather than removed, adjusted to the new system. I'm sort of just thinking out loud there, but I think there could be some clarification there on that point.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, hello. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try and be helpful to find the will of the committee. I think we all agree with the decision, but some are finding, nearly all, a majority agrees with the decision. It's just a matter of how clear it was, and it is possible to misinterpret it, but that's not part of the call-in. So I think we need to go with option I, agree with the decision which has been called in, etc. And I'm prepared to propose that if someone else would like to second it.
Hang on, just 1 second, and I'm happy to go with that route. We had another alternative, so I'm just bear with me 1 second. Okay, I wanted to make sure we've nailed down on this because we were having other discussions. Right, so just to clarify the point, we are talking about Councillor Wilson has proposed point I, which is agree with the decision which has been called in which case it will be implemented with immediate effect. That has then been seconded by, I don't want to put words in your mouth, has that been, okay, Councillor Cope has seconded that, okay. So we have a seconder for that. So we need to vote on that. We just do?
Yeah, just do.
Hands. Okay. So all those are in favour of that proposal. Okay. And those against? Okay.
Well, I presume there's not going to be any abstentions. But...
Okay. Oh, crikey, do I need a vote? I didn't put my hand up.
Well, what is your vote?
I'm going to go with the option that's been proposed, yes. For.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay. That's it. That's fine. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, 22 to 33.
Chair, can I just thank you for chairing what's clearly been a difficult meeting? Thank you
very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank all those contributors, everybody tonight. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for the officers who have been here, obviously, for quite a while as well. And see you all next week on a number of occasions, I'm sure. Thank you and good night.